Oh man, I look awful. Good morning, Mia.
Good morning. Happy New Year.
Is it? We'll see about that,
Yeah, I hope so.
me. Clarence asked me to introduce Greenwood Asher Jan, so let me know when.
Okay.
Mia, just for the record, thank you for all that you do. You're amazing. Really appreciate it. Charlene, you also.
Thank you.
Good morning, Clarence.
Good morning. Good morning.
How are you doing? You look so professional.
I do that so people will think I'm intelligent and won't ask me questions. I try not to speak to.
Yes, I think I know that role. It's one of the ways of surviving in the legislature.
Well, having to present to the legislature.
Yeah, well, one way or the other. Yeah.
Don't you call that fake it until you make it?
I am working on perfecting that one. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. This is Mia.
Morning.
Hi, Mia.
Are we live yet?
It doesn't look like it.
Good.
We had an issue with the live stream, so Charlene and Joshua are working on that right now.
Okay.
And Charlene will let us know when we're live.
Sounds good. Thank you. Boy. I've done so many of these.
So it looks like, I'm sorry, Clarence, to interrupt. It looks like we may be live now.
Okay, very good.
We're connected.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. This is Charlene.
Good morning.
Charlene.
Good morning. We're live on YouTube, but we are not live on Town Hall streams yet. So if you give me a couple more minutes.
All righty, very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's better. I think I need to get my hair done.
I just found out that we are live on both streams. So we're good to go.
Thank you very much, Charlene.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Madam Superintendent.
Good morning, Mr. President.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
Good, excellent. Good to see you. Be glad when we can finally get back, and
Yeah, I'm hoping February, Clarence.
that's what I'm hoping as well. I'm going to make an announcement to that effect.
Just talking to Laura this morning, we did an interview with Tim Tootin in the boardroom.
We're live streaming, just so you know. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Morning, Clarence and Rachel. Karen,
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chip. How are you?
good. Hope you're well.
Very well, thank you.
Good.
Hey, General. Good morning, sir.
Morning, everyone else. Good morning.
Morning. We are live streaming on both platforms. Good morning, Dr.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. We are live stream. Just let everyone know. Welcome and good morning.
President Crawford, you're probably keeping count, but you do have a quorum.
Okay, very good. I think we're about 5 minutes, still about 5 minutes early. I believe. About 5 minutes early, so we'll start right at 11. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We'll start at 11. We're about 5 minutes early. We are currently live streaming for your information. Yes, Dr. Green. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call our meeting to order. Ask everyone to mute your phones, your devices, unless you are speaking. At this time, I would like to turn to Dr. Simpson to call the roll. Dr. Simpson, please.
Mr. Bartley, Mr. Bartley. Ms. Bates.
Present.
Mr. DeShiel.
Present.
Dr. Getty.
Present.
Dr. Green.
Present.
Ms. Hallen.
Present.
Dr. Lee.
Present.
Ms. McCusker.
Present.
Dr. Melly McCarthy.
Present.
Ms. Morrow.
Present.
General Sumter.
Present.
Dr. Wilcox.
Present.
Mr. Wu.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Mr. Crawford.
Present. Good morning.
Dr. Salmon. Good morning.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. And I'll say again, Mr. Bartley. Mr. President Crawford, the roll call is complete.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Sean?
All of your members are present.
Very good. Thank you, sir. I would like to welcome the board members and staff and members of the public to our meeting.
I can't hear anything. Is the volume on? I cannot hear anything.
We can hear you. I'm trying. You, Mr. Bradley, can you just pause for right now? All right. All right. And let me welcome board members, staff, members of the public. The meeting will be conducted virtually. The public can access the meeting through town hall streams and the YouTube streaming on the state board's website. The meeting and agenda material are already posted there. The archived video will be posted on the website. During the meeting, only the board members and presenters will be allowed to speak. The board members will be asked to hold their questions until the end of each presentation. Board members are asked to identify themselves, and as well as staff to identify themselves when they're speaking. Dr. Salmon will respond to the questions or comments, or she will designate a staff member to do so. Voting will be conducted by voice vote and or roll call. And Mr. Schoen will validate each vote. I'd like to make just a few introductory remarks. The first thing I would like to do is to thank the governor for the budget. The governor's budget represents an increase for education, and in particular, I'm particularly interested in thanking him for the attempts, the measures to hold school systems harmless going into next school year. We've gotten a lot of comments from our stakeholders. I believe we've even had people present during the public comment period about this important topic. So that's in his budget, front and center. Also, just want to support the idea that we support, and we've talked about this many times ourselves, about the importance of returning children to safe in-person instruction. Along those lines, I just want to give a quick update. We've been working, Dr. Salmon has been helping us tremendously and her folks. We're implementing some upgrades to this boardroom, and hopefully we will be able to soon resume some face-to-face in-person meetings. We will be letting you know more about that, but just wanted to let you know that it's in the works. We're working that. We've got things underway. And the first item that we're gonna, Dr. Simpson, are our Greenwood guests with us yet?
They are, sorry, they are trying to log on now, so if you could just give them a few minutes.
I just have I see Ms. McCusker would like to say something. Please. Welcome. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, President Crawford, for the opportunity to address the board today. As you know, the legislature created the teacher position on the state board to bring teacher voice to this body and to the citizens of the state. And teachers want you to know that we are appreciative of recent efforts at the federal level to bring emergency new funding and clear guidance to schools to fully reopen buildings. And we're hopeful that this coming legislative session will result in the funding that we need to begin long recovery from this pandemic, both in the short term through our state budget and in the long term through the blueprint for Maryland's future. We're also appreciative of the opportunity to be in vaccination group 1B, and we look forward to increased vaccine distribution so we can access the vaccine as quickly as possible in the coming weeks so that we may be in our buildings with increased safety for ourselves, our students, and our families. We want to be with our students, teaching them in the most effective way in our safe schools. In light of recent negative comments, we also want you to know that tens of thousands of us report to our classrooms across the state, whether they are in schools or through our screens, each and every school day, willing and able to deliver instruction using methods we hadn't dreamed of just a short year ago. Our classrooms look different across the state, but regardless of how they look or where they're located, they are our classrooms, and we strive to make them effective, caring places to learn. At the end of the school day, we grade and give feedback in new ways. We plan for the delivery of material in as many as 3 different learning modes simultaneously. We connect to and support our school families while trying to care for our own families. Put simply, educators are working harder than ever this year, and our worry for our students has magnified. There's been an incredible amount of hurt and frustration among teachers in the last several days that adds a great deal of anxiety to an already difficult and unprecedented situation. However, we remain partners in this complicated reality that has few black and white answers, and we go above and beyond our contracts and certification requirements to help navigate and support our state's children through this difficult time. We are confident that when all of us work to find common ground and take the time to listen, that we as a state will build back stronger because we did it together. And I appreciate the time to make this statement.
Thank you very much for the statement. Dr. Simpson, have our Greenwood representatives logged in?
It looks like Jan is now on the line.
Okay.
And I don't see yet. So Jan, hi, can you hear me? This is Mia. Hi.
Good morning.
And we can see you, and I believe we can also hear you. Can you say good morning again, please?
Good morning.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, very good. What I'd like to do is to just do a, I can steal one of Dr. Salmon's comments is sort of level set a little bit as to what we're going to do. The search committee has been charged with leading the search for the superintendent. Wanted to come to the full board and to the public and just give an update on where we are and to sort of get a sense as we get ready to move forward. I want to just mention the names of the search committee. That's Dr. McCarthy, Ms. McCusker, Mr. Bartley, Mr. Wu, and last but not least, the distinguished vice chair, Senator Gail Bates. Senator Bates, I'm going to turn it over to you now to introduce our guests and make your comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was privileged to serve on the previous committee, which was sorely interrupted due to COVID. And I would like to first of all thank Clarence Crawford for his expert leadership. He is quite gifted in the area of search and analysis and so forth, and it's a real blessing. We are grateful to have Jan Greenwood and her team on board. We did a search for teams or for companies to help us in this task. In our previous task, we did not get strong results, and we're very, very happy that we have such a fine team on board. They are working very hard for us, and as all of you know, this is an absolute critical position for us. I want to thank Karen Salmon, first of all, for the fine leadership. I had the privilege of working with her when I was in the legislature before coming onto the board, and she's a real blessing, and we're going to miss her. But it is critical that we find somebody who can take the helm and look out for the future of our children, because if we fail them, we have failed as adults. So we're really happy to have Jan and her team on board. They have a lot of experience in Maryland, a lot of knowledge about Maryland, and we're very, very pleased to have them. And Jan, thank you for the quality people you have working for you, and thank you for the work you're doing for us. And I'd like to turn it over to Jan.
Okay, thank you so much, Senator Bates. Folks, good morning to you. Happy Monday. I hope everyone's healthy. You have Jan Greenwood here and Julie Holly from Greenwood Asher and Associates. Julie's coming to you from her office in Tennessee, and I'm coming to you from mine in Florida. So good morning to you. A little bit of history. Julie is a senior executive search consultant and works on very major, meaning large-scale searches with me. So we're your team for this. Julie has roots in Maryland, and that's wonderful as well. And that other location is in Old Town Alexandria, Virginia, not too far from you. So that's a little bit of the background. Suzanne Griffin, I'm not sure if Suzanne's on with us or not. She was trying to get on. Suzanne has experience in pre-K through 12 and experience actually at all levels. And she's part of your team as well, and is also COO of our company. Let me suggest to you that when we're not speaking, you silence your microphone to eliminate the background noise, or to attempt to eliminate the background noise, I should say. And that way we can all hear each other clearly. Senator Bates, would you like for me to go right into the presentation?
I believe that's appropriate at this point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me just get my screen in order here. I'm going to have to minimize your screen to be able to do this. Julie, have you got it on a screen share? Julie, I can't hear you.
I'm getting ready to share my screen, Jan. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. All right, just a minute. Let me get my right screen. Okay, folks, when you see that screen share, I'm on a different screen.
So that's, let's see.
Can anyone share? Can anyone see the screen share?
We're not quite there yet, Jan. Here we go.
Okay.
See that?
Senator Bates, if you could give us a signal if you can see the screen share.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to walk you through this and highlight some things as we go.
Yeah, ask everyone to mute your phones, your devices if you're not speaking. Please mute your devices if you're not speaking. Thank you.
Thank you so much. a minute, I'm having a screen issue going on here. Okay. So I'm still getting a lot of background noise, I'm sorry.
I think that's coming from Ms. Holly's.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to mute me. I'm sorry, so let me figure. Charlene, are you able to mute her from your end? Thank you.
Okay. So basically on this first screen, we're just basically having an introduction screen. So Julie, please go to slide 2 now. On this screen, we're basically showing you the methodology. There were, I'm going to highlight a few things for you. There were 229 people who completed the survey, and it was a mix of segments from people in education and those outside of education. In terms of the comments, these findings that are presented are statistically significant in most cases. In some cases, they're not. But I would remind you, those who are into statistics, we're into small numbers. So therefore, percentages perhaps have less meaning. The process for the study, just a second. My screen just went back. There we go. The process for the study involved the following steps. Keeps clicking back, just bear with me. I don't know why it's doing that. We had open-ended questions and got answers to those. And then we eliminated all answers that were checked by artificial intelligence for response quality, basically eliminating gibberish. And then evaluated respondents. They voted on if they supported the answers of others or not. That's the AI coming into play, and finding those with the most relevance. So in terms of match, some similar responses are consolidated. You will still see the statements within the study that are still similar, but it errs on the side of caution. And I would point out to you, while we're not there yet, that all the slides after 24 are all detailed summaries, not really the kinds of things that would be easy to read on a screen share, even for a PowerPoint presentation, but just to let you know that there is detailed backup for all of this. Let's go to slide 3. Slide 3 is simply showing you the methodology. And we did precede some questions with responses from this first survey that you did. So in other words, those were in there so we could check to see if they were still relevant. And we can tell you that from comparing the previous survey with this one, they are still relevant. And the issue about COVID will come up soon, but basically the answers that were given in the first survey are still relevant in this survey, this one being far more detailed and involving artificial intelligence in sorting through all of them to determine those characteristics for you. The next slide, slide 4. Okay, these are basically a breakdown of respondents. So you can see, and again, you can see very small numbers, but the majority, of course, being people in education. Slide 5 moves to key findings. So we go to slide 6. These are key takeaways from the survey. So if you look at these, now your numbers are not going to add up because, for example, a person taking the survey could choose more than one thing. So for example, if they chose 2 things, it would be one type of percentage. So it's the percentage of those who chose it, just so you're aware of that. So don't try to add numbers or it won't add up. These, I think, are really important as we think about trying to recruit people who are a very good match for you. And you'll see out to the right, you'll see the desired leadership traits in the state superintendent. And to the left, you will see the strengths that people perceive in the state of Maryland. You also will see as a common theme throughout all of these slides that diversity and understanding diversity and diversity meant in every sense of the word is very big on people's minds. So keep that in mind. But I think these are really important to look at out to the right simply because you're going to see a lot of evidence that people's main thinking is on the person's soft skills. And so this is one that really goes to leadership traits. And I think this is really important as you look at the overall characteristics. Let's go to slide 7. Slide 7, the ideal candidate. This is something that I think is very useful as well, because one of the things that we ask your search committee is looking at these things, how will you know this person meets your criteria when you review their paperwork and you interview them and you hear the referencing. So that's what this one does. Again, inclusion comes up, understanding the system, being able to leverage resources, and student success, which is another common theme throughout. People want to feel heard and valued. That came up a lot in all of our work, including our conversations that Julie and I have had with multiple constituents. And be able to leave their impact in a significant way, making sure that the people in Maryland, their personal needs are considered every step of the way. We go to slide 8 and we look at detailed findings, so then to slide 9. This one is interesting as it relates to our representing the state of Maryland in a way that is currently consistent with its citizens. So if you look at that, it'll show you what Marylanders brought up. And again, you see diversity coming up again more than once in terms of the main strengths of the state. So you see that continuing theme in a very big way. Then we go to slide 10. This again is more helpful to Julie and me. And again, these numbers will not add up. They're not supposed to. So as you think about it, just look at the somewhat satisfied and the very dissatisfied to give you a sense of the majority of Marylanders look like they're either very satisfied or somewhat satisfied, but there still is a large collection of people that are somewhat dissatisfied or very dissatisfied. And then we go down to slide 11. This is another one about the background, just letting you know. As things come up, those of you that remember when sociograms were used often, the bigger the circle, the more the people that said it. Smaller the circle, the fewer that said it. So this shows you kind of a bird's eye view in terms of how things are viewed, with 67% viewing as teachers as a real strength in Maryland. We go to slide 12, and you will see that the challenges that your public views you facing, and you'll see again the biggest number being retaining high quality teachers, and then support for selected programs and needs, technology, funding, and then meeting the needs of the diverse population. So while diverse is a smaller circle here, it is still in the catch of the majority of areas that people have an interest in. Then we go to the next one, slide 13, opportunities to improve the elements. And you see this is getting a bit lengthy for a PowerPoint presentation, but just wanted you to know the data is there that the search committee board and we will be using in terms of finishing the position profile and doing your search. Now the findings, this slide 15, is very, very important to you to understand that the majority of your citizens that chose to respond, and this is consistent with the phone calls that Julie and I had, are really after what is called the soft skills. If any of you teach business, you know that soft skills is not used as often these days, but these are what have become historically known as the soft skills of the person. These are the kinds of things that you really get through referencing. And if we were doing personality, leadership, soft skills assessment, we would pick it up through the assessment devices. Those are options that the board can choose to use or not. But these are the areas that are the leadership qualities that your constituents feel are very, very important. And you also see that, again, diversity, 85%, is a big one in the area of trustworthiness. So these are statements that we put into the trustworthy category. Transparency, of course, not a surprise either, but these are your major areas of leadership qualities. Slide 16, a continuation, the range of interpersonal skills as you see it. It's another way to display it. You see diplomacies in there and critical thinking. So take a moment and glance through that. And then slide 17, we asked them in terms of firsthand experience, what they thought the candidates should have, what would be desired in the next state superintendent. And these are the three big areas: diverse audiences, public school educator, and leader. So these are your three big areas that there was a lot of agreement about that. And then this is where it gets very meaty. So this is slide 19, and these are focusing on areas that superintendent should be able to do. I don't know if you can see that last one because of the color. We're going to change out the color. It's bridging the gap to government. And you see that they think securing funding, attracting personnel, COVID recovery, and updating curriculum, technology, and physical buildings are major points. And then we go to slide 20. There came through both all the conversations Julie and I had, as well as on this, that support of the Curran Commission is critically important and must be done. So there is very strong support in the evidence, both in terms of the survey as well as the conversations, that this is a major priority in order to accomplish the rest. Now, as we move to slide 21, excuse me, I'm getting over a little bit of a head cold here. You see that they're talking about technology and training as two key areas to empower our teachers to do their job well and to have our students learn. If we go to slide 22, you see about digital solutions and their comments about that. And that is one thing, the online learning is here to stay. There's great agreement with that. And also that not everything can be outsourced. I think that's really important. And then the rest, this is where it gets very cumbersome to you, starting at slide 24. Julie, just very quickly flow through those so they can see what's there if they love the detail and want to get into a lot of detail after this meeting, because there is plenty of detail there. So let me stop with that and go back to those of you on this call and see what would be helpful for you. Senator Bates, would you like to react first, as well as President Crawford? Hello?
Can you hear me now?
I can.
That
Thank
sounds like one of those commercials, isn't it? Yeah, can you hear me now? I just think this is extraordinary, the amount of information you've provided to us. It looks like in many ways we're already on target for a lot of those things, and I think we need to continue them, but I think you've done a great amount of work in helping us identify the kind of qualities and the direction we need to go. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you, Senator.
Jen, you do a lot of these searches. Are we asking for similar kinds of things? Are people identifying similar requirements and goals and desires for superintendent?
President Crawford, they are. This looks very typical with the exception of the Kerwin Commission. And that is the standout item. And that is the item that makes Maryland very unique and distinct in every way. The challenge is the soft skills. Soft skills is a huge area, but it is in every state. I think in your search, there's a little less emphasis on legislative involvement, executive branch involvement in terms of responses. That did come up in some of the conversations Julie and I had, but there's less in terms of the responses in the survey than would be typical.
Okay. Are there any other general comments? I'd like to get comments about sort of what we have there, but and I also would like to take a little bit of the time to talk about the desired. I guess I'm going to say it, the next document, the action, the job description, not that, the job description. What we have here that the our search committee has worked with the Greenwood is to sort of distill all of what you saw in the PowerPoint into a succinct part of the that would fit in the job description and help with the search criteria. Jan, if you want to walk through that, then I think what we do is we open it up for comments and from the entire board if they have any additional comments or suggestions. I'd like to ask you some questions about searches for superintendents. What does this cycle look like? What should we anticipate? Your experience and knowledge around that.
Okay, well, first we put together this draft for professional qualifications and personal qualities. Julie and I are going back through this one more time, doing any reconciliation with the survey results. So that's on our to-do list as the next thing after this meeting. As you look at the experience, again, this is fairly typical. You will see, for example, under the statutory requirements in the first section in experiences, that these are the basics that the state statute requires. So those are there just as a reminder. Then in the next section, the additional things that the state superintendent will possess. Again, these are very typical. The question becomes how much you want us to embed in this document specifics that refer by name to the Kerwin Commission. And that is something that will very much attract people, but we also don't want to get out ahead, obviously, of the potential that it will or will not be supported. You will see in this list primarily things that can be measured. Julie, could you go back, please? Primarily things that could be measured. Thank you. and not so much soft skills. So these things from interviews, from referencing, as well as from their paperwork, we're able to assess this. We use a behavioral assessment model in evaluating candidates, where we look at what they've accomplished, what their role was, and how they went about doing work. And of course, how they went about doing work sometimes goes straight to the heart of soft skills. So we pick up soft skills in that way too. Julie, if you would scroll down to the next section. In terms of skills, go back up just a little bit, Julie. The skill area, you will see that we have some action things in there as well. Many of those things can be assessed in the same way that the previous section could. And then we go down to desired qualifications. And in this section, here's where you pick up more of the soft skills. Now, certain things you can get from what they've done. For example, the commitment to public education and structure of public ed in Maryland. Of course, that can be determined through their experiences and their interviews, as well as their references. Notice that the wording on that, Julie, if you go back, please. The wording on that, the structure of Maryland, is not something that says they had to have worked in Maryland, but it says that in terms of the structure, there is a commitment to that structure. So now, Julie, if you'd go down some more, please, to the next section. Are we at the bottom of the sections? I thought there was one more. Okay, so that's the overall framework for it. And as I said, the next step is Julie and I will be reconciling this with the survey results. Let me take a pause there and see if there are any questions about that. Any comments?
I have a question. Let me see.
Yes, please.
I'd just like you to comment on the qualification about dealing with digital disruption. It really shows that you're looking for experience, and I guess I was hoping for leadership since we are in such a disrupted time. And if you could just speak to that point, I'd appreciate it.
Well, I think the leadership issue is evidenced through this isn't a new field for them. It's really critically important, and that's certainly what's intended. It's not necessarily intended that they've actually done it. They've done courses online and all of that, but rather that they've led and they've worked in that kind of environment. Thank you for pointing that out. We'll look at the wording in that again and see if it should be altered.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me just say a couple of things, and then I want to give our board an opportunity to weigh in. When the board established the search committee, they asked us to manage the process. But all of the key decisions from the time, everything we've done, we've tried to be very transparent to keep the board engaged. As we enter this next important phase, the outreach and identification of candidates, we'll welcome ideas or suggested candidates, but the board will be involved in all of the interviews. The board will have access to all of the candidate information. All of this information must be kept confidential, but the board will have access to all of that and will participate in all of the interviews so that everyone can see everything. The leading question I would like to ask, and then we'll just open up to the board. Jan, why do companies use executive firms? You know, we could just as easily post this on our website and say we're looking for a new superintendent. Why do school systems use, or organizations like that use executive search firms? And talk a little bit about what do you actually do? Do you just wait for people to submit applications? What do you actually do to find candidates?
Really good questions. And certainly back in the 70s, And somehow, part of the 80s too, school systems did not use search firms for the most part. And then the market shifted rather dramatically. And as you can well imagine, anyone who's been a successful superintendent is in high demand. And so everyone wants them. That's a slight overstatement. And so what has happened is that as you think about the state superintendents and you think about their jobs, they're dealing with legislators, they're dealing with the executive branch, they're dealing with boards. They've got a huge constituency of their entire state, and they don't want a disruption of people knowing that they may be on their way out. The theme of, well, we thought we loved you and now you're looking at someone else. What is this about? So it tends to, with leaders, especially in education, whether it's higher ed or pre-K through 12, it tends to be highly disruptive at the leadership level and in fact handicaps the leadership when they look at another position, therefore enters executive search firms. You get candidates through three areas. One is an ad response. And I think in almost 30 years of doing this work, for the leadership positions, very, very few boards have chosen someone from an ad response. They're evaluated the same way as everyone else, but oftentimes boards might worry about someone who's reading the want ads for a leadership position. Second area you get candidates from is through nominations. And we're already getting some from those of you, I'm sure, on this call, as well as others. And nominations are people, that's like a third-party endorsement. So it's someone that you think would be terrific at it, and you send us a nomination to follow up on. Or it's someone we're talking with as a source or a potential candidate. And they say, I'm not really interested, but I know the ideal person. So that's a nominee. The third is based on your survey and based on your position profile. Julie and I developed what we call a call list. So to complicate it a little bit, if you think in terms of concentric circles, the inner circle is your ideal candidate based on everything you've said. We want to be certain we've reached out to all of those people. So what we will do in terms of recruitment, we will call that entire group and go beyond if we need to. Second circle out would be candidates or potential candidates who have some but not all of the experiences. And that allows us to have lifetime conversations with people about your wonderful opportunity without their constituents knowing that that confidential conversation is occurring. The other thing too is, as we think about that, we also do marketing for you. We will send out many emails announcing to the world that the search is going on and what's being done, and if they know anyone to recommend them to us. But we do not rely on that or on ads as being the sole opportunity to get candidates. If we get candidates through those, that's wonderful. If we don't, it doesn't hurt your search. It's our recruitment that works in order to develop your pool. So that's what we're hired to do. And it's a little different in higher ed, just to give you a comparison, because you have many wonderful universities in Maryland. There are many presidents who've lost their jobs for looking at other positions. There are presidents who've lost donor funding. I personally know about 2 presidents who lost $10 million each when the donor found out that the president was looking at another opportunity. And there's so many times they can do this before they're out of favor with their board. And your situation in the pre-K through 12 market is slightly different in that fundraising becomes getting money from the legislature. So as you think about that, it does translate. The other thing to complicate matters is that if you looked at a map of the school superintendents, the state superintendents across the nation, you'll find that many of them are still very new in their position. They haven't been there long enough to really be tested yet. And those who've been there longer That is a question whether or not they would leave or not, especially if they think they have very good working relationships in the state and with their board and their staff. So it's very important when you get a terrific superintendent, you hold on to that person, because there will be plenty of people coming after them, not us, but other firms and other systems, as soon as they've demonstrated they're successful on their watch. President Crawford, did that respond to your question, or do you want me to add more?
I think that's fine. What I'd like to do now is to open it up for our board to ask questions. Since I can't see everyone, if you could just speak up. I see Dr. Lee and then Senator Bates.
Thank you.
So Dr. Lee, please.
Hi, thank you, Jan, for a wonderful presentation and for that explanation. That was very helpful. One of the things that you showed was all of the things that we're looking for and what the superintendent needs to come with. What I'm wondering is if another service you probably provide is competitive analysis. We know that there are many other districts and localities, big ones, looking for superintendents too. So a couple of questions. Do you have a way to articulate the benefits of taking the job in comparison to maybe other opportunities out there? And do you have a non-compete clause so you guys can't go work for another competing locality looking for a superintendent? And could you talk a little bit about the advantages or incentives that might be there and how we are competitively, salary-wise, benefits-wise, potential accomplishment-wise, that kind of thing?
Okay, may we extend the meeting by about 4 hours? Okay, let me walk through this with you. First of all, the easiest thing to respond to is a non-compete. In the history of this firm, we have never taken on competitive searches at the same time. So the process, I'll give you just an example so you know just how seriously we take it. If we were to receive a request to do the search for the state superintendent for Florida, that's a different name down there, first thing we would be doing is calling President Crawford and asking him if he viewed it as competitive. If he said, yes, it is, then we would pass that opportunity. So not only do we use our own judgment, but we also check in with our client to be certain that it's not an issue. The second thing, we never recruit out our placements. Now, there are circumstances where, for example, they might respond to an ad for something we're doing, and there's an ethical consideration there that anyone who responds to an ad you acknowledge. But if, in fact, they wanted to be a candidate, if we were to manage their candidacy, they'd have to have written approval from President Crawford. So there's a check and balance in there. So that's that. The second area, which is fairly easy to respond to, is the issue of representing Maryland. Of course, neither Julie or I currently live in Maryland, but we feel like we've interviewed a cast of thousands right now and thank them for all their wonderful input. But we also know that in terms of the representation you have, that's critically important. And if there's anything that you think got missed in the survey, we want to hear about that as well so we can be sure to represent that. Now to the more difficult part of your question. Compensation, what typically in the jargon of search is called contract. Sometimes it is an actual contract, sometimes it's an agreement, so different things. And I would ask you to picture the following. Let's assume that your ideal candidate is from San Diego. Let's assume that that candidate is thrilled about moving to Maryland and this opportunity. Let's assume, however, there are two wrinkles. One is their partner or spouse has a medical practice and will have to give that up to make the move. And the second, they have a teenager in high school who does not want to leave their friends. So you ask yourself, is there anything contractually that we can do to incent the entire family to move? If in fact you wanted the entire family there. And I would respond by saying, number one, your salary needs to be more competitive. There needs to be performance options. You need to be able to evaluate that annually and change as needed. And you also need a contract that's longer term. If I am a candidate and I'm looking at an opportunity which will only assure me 1 year employment, why would my spouse or partner give up their medical practice to move across country? How am I going to persuade my teenage child to be able to leave his or her friends when it may be just for a year? So things that we see, a lot of things that are done to, quote, sweeten the deal, to make it more agreeable. Never, never, never giving up the option as a board to remediate the situation if needed, when needed. So that is that would be something that we would highly recommend you never eliminate from a contract or an agreement. So I think I maybe missed something of what you were asking. There were quite a few things in there, but let me stop with that and just take any questions you have or comments.
Clarence?
I believe, did that satisfy your questions? Just check in just with.
I think you can't answer fully my question, but I'm basically wanting to make sure that we articulate to the extent possible the benefits of picking Maryland in this position.
Yes.
And one of the things that I've talked to Greenwood about, you know, if you're going to take an assignment with a new organization, some candidates are going to want to talk to people in that new organization. So I've let Greenwood know that I was confident that there would be members of the board that would be willing to just talk to someone. If we see a highly qualified candidate, they just want to talk to the board. They want to talk to people in the state of Maryland, that we would make ourselves available to just talk to them. If that's part of helping them figure out whether they actually want to throw their names in the hat or not, that we would be open to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go to Senator Bates and then to Ms. Haley, please.
Okay. Thank you. The things that we're looking for, the qualities and so forth, the experience and all that, how does that compare to other searches that you've been doing? Are we comparable? Are we looking for similar things? Is there anything that really stands out to you that might be difficult to meet?
Nothing stands out that would be difficult, Senator Bates, and it all is pretty typical. The one thing that is not built into your search is the use of assessment devices. And we do have a battery of those that could be used. Their personality, their leadership, their soft skills, their emotional intelligence as well. We do find that the clients that choose to use those find them extremely instructive. And those are done by our partners who do psychological assessment. And they end up in about 50-page reports for each candidate. And most boards, because it is an expensive proposition, most boards will do that only on the finalist plural. So if there are 2 or 3, and oftentimes it will shade the differences between and amongst candidates that you would get only through assessment. So I think that you're on target in terms of what you're looking for. I can't hear you, Senator Bates.
Bates, you are muted.
Technology is not my strong suit, forgive me. We have a 4-year contract, or at this point, I believe it's going to be filling out a 3-year contract. How does that compare? Are we competitive there? You talked a little bit about, you know, how long people stay. I'm just wondering how do we compare?
The most competitive in terms of being able to not worry about losing your candidate, your superintendent, is a 5-year contract. Now, here's the way this tends to work. If a state superintendent, again, getting a lot of background noise from
Okay.
if I'm a state superintendent and I have a 5-year contract, you can consider me highly focused until year 4. And then year 4, I may start to accept calls from people who are our competitors. If I have a 1-year contract, I'm barely in the door when I'm looking at other opportunities. If I have a 3-year contract, I'm going to give you 2 versions of the 3-year. If I have a 3-year contract, you've got my attention for a 1.5 years, 2 years, and then I'm going to accept those calls. Well, let's just stop with that for a minute. No, I do want to take it one more step. Sorry, I'm editing my thinking as I go. If I have a 3-year contract that is structured so at the end of year 1, I'm evaluated, and my contract is renewed an additional year, so it's always 3 years, as long as I'm performing acceptably, then that is an acceptable approach too. But in terms of behavior of candidates, this is the kind of behavior we see as very predictable.
Okay, well, the one last question, I appreciate the time, Mr. Crawford. There's a piece of legislation that's been introduced that would require our appointee to be confirmed and approved by the state legislature. Is that out of the ordinary? Is that something that other jurisdictions handle, and how to, is that going to be a detriment, or is that more commonplace?
I think it depends on the timing of it. Senator Bates, if it's something that can happen quickly before you would expect them to be there, but right in timing at the same time as the board making a decision, that would not be that unusual. If it's something like 6-month delay, a year delay, whatever, that is a problem. So just be aware of that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Jane Alley. I want to follow up a little bit on Dr. Lee's question in terms of what we have that is more attractive than maybe others that are also doing a superintendent search. And I'd also like to hear your comments on our governance structure. So we have a position that right now reports to the State Board of Education and has some responsibilities to the governor. And through Kerwin, there'll be a new accountability board that will require the new superintendent to also have some responsibilities to that board. So if you could comment on those 2 things, what makes us hopefully more competitive, and how governance might influence this search?
Well, the issue on more competitive, what the Kerwin condition has done is, in essence, has said that we as Maryland want to be a leader, and we've put a lot of investment of very intellectually powerful people to come up with what that needs to be. So that's the big selling point. The issue of the accountability board that you mentioned, getting questions on how that would play out. Does the state superintendent have to interact with this board? Is this board one that is intended to merely be a check and balance if needed and used only when needed, or if perceived that it's needed? Or is this new state superintendent really reporting to 2 boards and also to the governor? So there are questions about governance that are out there. And some of it involves the executive branch of government as compared with the board. And some of it involves that as well as the oversight board. So I think that if we were fast forwarding to interviews right now, I think there would be a lot of questions for the search committee around the most current reality of how that would be experienced, and the involvement the state superintendent would have with that group. For example, one question I got is, if the state superintendent has been evaluated for a performance raise, does the accountability board also have to weigh in? Does the governor also have to weigh in? So there's some of those things that are specific to the individual. and some that are specific to policy formulation. If the board and the state superintendent desire to have XYZ policy presented to the legislators, does it have to go to the accountability board first? So they're more the, how will it work type of things, and how much does it involve the state superintendent directly?
I'm afraid that we don't have a lot of answers to those questions, so it might be helpful if in your search you're able to help the board anticipate these questions, and perhaps we can have some dialogue that would help to refine some of those points.
We certainly will. That'll be in the regular reports that we give, and we track it as we go along from each phone call. We also track one thing, going back to a previous question, I think it was Dr. Lee's question. As we're talking with candidates or potential candidates, we're also trying to get from them what other searches they're in, and if they are in other searches, because most people in education, when they're looking at one opportunity, they're looking at more than one. Ask them what is attractive about that opportunity compared to this opportunity, what's their timeline, about contractual issues. So we are getting intelligence beyond intelligence, and that it's directly related to those who are interested in your position. And that also will be reported.
Thank you very much.
That's just, Ms. McCusker, I want to make sure that the board members have an opportunity to ask a question, and then we'll wrap up because we have other items I want to cover, but I want to just make sure everyone gets a chance. Ms. McCusker?
Thank you. Just one quick question. How heavy is the competition for the superintendent positions across the country right now? Are we anticipating a really heavy competition or light competition for the top candidates?
Well, there are a number of superintendents that are in their first 3 years. So, many of those will perhaps want to look based on what I had said earlier. But they still are, you still have to question whether they have accomplished what is being done, or is that what the previous state superintendent set in motion is being accomplished. So it depends on how you look at whether or not the person is currently a state superintendent or not. It depends on whether you look primarily within education or outside. And you'll notice, perhaps you saw from the survey, the vast majority feel it's very strong that the person's had public school experience at some level. So you've got that weighing in as well. It is competitive. However, one of the things that I've not mentioned today that's very attractive in Maryland is, quite frankly, the proximity to the nation's capital. And this happens both in Maryland and Virginia, in that there is the ability to potentially also be very convenient to impacting things at the national level. And that usually is something that is extremely well received in terms of competitiveness in the market.
Are there lots of other systems looking for a superintendent right now?
Julie, do you have the current count on that? I had it when we started, but I don't got it now.
I don't. I know a number have opened up recently, but we can get that data for them.
I see one hand up. Yes, sir.
Jan, this is Chip DeShiel. I want to thank you for your presentation, and the information that you're passing along with these questions is very helpful. It's sort of a follow-up to Ms. McCuster's question about the number of searches that may be going on nationwide for state superintendents. It sounds like that's information that can be provided to us. But my question is, in terms of the timeline for us, we're hoping to have a new superintendent within the June 30th, July 1st time frame. And I didn't know if that's a helpful time frame. We have adequate time to do the things we need to do. I'm sure your search timeline has guidelines that we could complete the search within that period. Is this unusual, though? Are there many other states that have extended timelines for hiring individuals? Or are we sort of in a crunch period to find the right candidate within the timeline we've set up?
I think considering that we're in the COVID crisis right now, that you've planned it just right in terms of timelines. I don't remember how long we took to do the chancellor's search for the New York City Public Schools or LA Unified District Superintendent. I think it was briefer. The fastest we've ever completed a search is 1 week. The typical is 3 to 4 months. Quite frankly, it really comes down to the availability of the board, the search committee, and the consistency and alignment with the candidates for interviews and all of that. So what we try to do to be certain that you stay on schedule is that as we're recruiting, we will say to candidates, hold these dates in case you're moved forward. And that generally presents problems where you're ready to move and they need a month before they can move in terms of the next step in the search. So we've found over the years that works extraordinarily well for our clients, and they're able to plan accordingly. And I obviously know all of them very busy people. So that comes into play.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chip. General Sumter.
Yes, kind of a follow-up to Chip's. Will you be giving us a timeline so that we can plan moving forward so that we can be responsive to your needs during the search? Number one. Number two, I was just curious, for the respondents to the survey, did you capture who were educators, who were parents, who might be legislators or of other boards? Is that possible to have that information?
Yes, that is within this report. It's one that I went by very quickly. Julie, while I'm talking, maybe you can pull up that one graph. I think it was early on in the presentation. And in terms of schedule, yes, we will have for you the schedule to be able to, what we do is we plan a schedule knowing how much time we need between each step to do quality work. And then we provide that for you, and you say, well, this date doesn't work, but can we do it on that date? So there's some back and forth, and then we settle on that, and then you'll have plenty of advance notice to be able to lock that in terms of your own calendars. On the screen that Julie's showing you, can all of you see the screen share right now? Okay, you can see the breakdown in terms of numbers and percentages. I think the numbers, because the numbers are so small compared to potentially thousands, that maybe looking at the percentages will be more useful. Is it large enough for you to read?
Yes, it is. And when we get hard copy, that'll be very helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other comments, questions? Julie, if I can get you to take down your PowerPoint, if you would, down your presentation. Thank you. So, board, we wanted to give you an update on where we were. Wanted to let you know that we've been working hard as the search committee. We have a weekly stand-up call with Greenwood just to check in, make sure we're on schedule, go over issues. That's Mondays. Board search committee members can join in. If any of you would want to sort of listen in, you're more than welcome to. It's typically Mondays in the afternoons. We do that weekly. As we did before, we didn't seek a vote. We're just concurrence that we're on the right track. We're heading for, give us a sense as to whether we're heading in the right direction. You will be intimately involved in any interviews, decisions, recommendations, You will have access to all of the information on each candidate. We will, again, as we talked before, you have to keep that very confidential because sometimes we're getting inquiries and expressions of interest from people that they haven't informed their current employers. It's very possible that some of our candidates will likely be on other people's short list as well. So again, sort of give us a sense of if we're on track with what you're doing, with what you have charged us with doing, and we will continue down this path and keep you fully apprised. Okay. So I'm assuming here, Dr. Lee, please, yes.
I just had one last question for Jan Greenwood. I was looking at the response rate of 229 people that responded. I was just curious to know, is that what you typically see? Because as a demographer, that's a really, really low response rate. And I would hesitate to, interpret and extrapolate from that. But if that's kind of what we can expect, I was just wondering if you feel like, did we not do enough to encourage people to respond and provide input, or compared to other searches you've done, is this typical? You're muted.
Jen, you're muted. Yes.
Thank you. Has to happen at least one time in every meeting, right? Dr. Lee, it is a very typical number. Now, unless there is something that is really draconian that is wrong, it is a typical number. The masses turn out when there's something that's really upset them. So what we do, regardless of if it's the masses or if it's a small number, we're looking for patterns. We're looking for consistency in terms of comments. We're also looking at outliers, of course, but you have huge consistency. So we're comfortable with that. There also, by the way, is very good consistency with your previous survey, except for the things that would be obviously impacting it because of COVID. So for example, diversity was very big. Previously, it still is very big.
All right, I would like to thank Greenwood and our search committee. And one of the other things that was maybe not stated that we almost take for granted, and that is that the new superintendent will inherit a very strong foundation. So they're not like have to come in and just build everything from scratch. They got a good foundation from which to build and to grow and to expand. So that's part of our sales pitch there as well. Thank you, Dr. Salmon. And okay, well, at this point, then what I'd like to do is again thank Greenwood and our search committee. Please reach out if you have any questions, or we'll continue to push along. Dr. Salmon, do you want to move right into the dashboard? Start that again. Dashboard, like the superintendent, and related are items that are on our priorities list. So we're trying to stay focused. We said these were priorities. So one of the ways you can actually tell whether these things are actually priorities is, are anybody actually following or asking questions? So the superintendent and her staff have done a great job in pulling together information. So we want to walk through that. And as we go, board members, and I know the superintendent, her folks are prepared and been thinking about this as well. What are the data telling us? What does it mean? What are the data telling us? And then how can we take what we're learning here to improve the quality of lives for our children? Because we have, if you think about this, my former life, I would be looking at this in two major components. One would be mission. So our mission is educating children, taking care of children. That's mission. The second part that leaders have as a principal responsibility is taking care of their troops. So that's looking at teachers, administrative support people, all of those folks, and making sure that we are taking care of them as well, because they're the ones that deliver the mission, you know? So those are the things. So as we look at this and have the superintendent, our folks come and talk about the scorecard or the dashboard to share with us, what are they seeing? And help us figure out, what does it mean? What should we be doing? Dr. Salmon?
Thank you. What a great cue set, President Crawford. And good afternoon, members of the board. It's good to see everyone's faces, and I hope everyone is staying healthy. So today we're going to start out with some summary data wrapped around the dashboard. And I'm going to allow Dr. Williamson to start the presentation. And I want to thank her and her team for the diligence they have showed to try to get all this information wrapped up for today's presentation. And I just want to make sure that folks understand that the data we are presenting today are reflective of the first term of the marking period, not now. So there, you may hear a statistic and you'll say, oh, that's not the way it is now. No, this is the way it was at the end of the first 45 days of the school year. So I just want to make that known again. I know it will be emphasized in the presentation, but I think that's a good way to think about this as you look at these data. So with no further introduction, Dr. Williamson, please proceed.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Salmon. And you and Mr. Crawford were very helpful in doing the Q set, and I may be a little bit repetitive, but I'll try not to be too repetitive. I just wanted to say good afternoon to all of you, President Crawford, Ms. Halley, Dr. Salmon, board members. The purpose of this presentation is to do exactly as Mr. Crawford said. We're providing you with an overview of what's happening in our school system across our state. And at the beginning of the school year, we did request that we develop a dashboard reflecting a variety of data points that you were interested in tracking. Your intention, you said, was to understand what was happening in our school system, and then to consider what trends were developing across the state and determine if there were actions that you could take to aid in that situation. And so since the fall of 2020, we have collected data on our school systems regarding those data points. Also included in information from our first quarter metrics, we place that there as well. And we're presenting this to you as a means of providing a sort of a, quote, state of the schools, end quote, ranging primarily from September through November of 2020. We utilized information from 6 major sources: our website, the first quarter data metrics survey collected at the end of November, our technology survey, the student data collection in our report card, and the dashboard information you had identified as areas of interest. Except for our student data collection, all of these data are self-reported information. In your packets, you have a dashboard reflecting the data for each school system on each of the data points. However, the focus of our presentation is to provide you with a statewide picture with data in the aggregate and to look at statewide trends. Again, the data only reflect, as Dr. Salmon said, the first quarter of the year. You'll have an opportunity to discuss those trends and determine if there are areas you want us to address. If you have questions about a particular system, we would ask you to please refer to your chart. Dr. Shaw will be reviewing with you the data we've collected. Mrs. Mary Gable, also a member of the team that collected the dashboard data, will join Dr. Shaw to respond to your questions. And then following the review and discussion of the dashboard, we're going to share some evidence-based strategies that can be implemented in our school systems to help counter the disruptive instruction with which our students have coped these past months. And then after that presentation, you again will have an opportunity to discuss the strategies and provide your input. And with that, I am going to turn this over to Dr. Shaw, who will use her computer to share the data.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Williamson, for the introduction. Thank you, Dr. Salmon and Mr. Crawford and members of the board for opportunity to share the data. I'm gonna pull up my screen. As it's sharing, let's see. WebEx takes a second to load up. Okay, can you guys see this all right? Yes, okay, I'm getting a nod yes from Dr. Williamson, thank you. So as Dr. Williamson said, these are a statewide summary of data that you have in your dashboard gathered from multiple different sources. And again, you also have what I'll call the master list or the master spreadsheet that has individual school systems and their very specific results. I'm going to talk about 5 different areas. These are roughly sequential in terms of the student experience. So first, I'm going to talk about student enrollment. So what does enrollment look like in the fall? The next, after students are enrolled, well, they have to show up to class. So the second area that I'm going to talk about is student attendance. The next area is learning modes. So once the student is attending class, what type of learning are they experiencing? The fourth area is equity in technology for learning. So are they able to access learning opportunities, especially those that require technology? And then fifth, we do have some questions about personal protective equipment in schools and the way that our systems are utilizing that as well. As both Dr. Williamson and Dr. Salmon already mentioned, these data are pulled from numerous different data sources. The first, again, I think this is very important, but the only data here that are not based on reports from the local school systems themselves are the enrollment data. We do an enrollment data collection every single school year, pandemic or not. And so the first section of this presentation on enrollment are drawn from that data. Anything else is from a survey or from other reports. And each slide does have that data source noted on it as well. We did give any data points that looked slightly out of range or perhaps were an error in the way that they were reported to us. We did give school systems an opportunity to correct. There is one that I'm going to point out to you in which the school system literally sent me a correction about 10 minutes ago. And so I will have that updated number for you as I talk through it. And again, all data are presented, applied to the first marking period, anything where we asked cumulative data or where we needed to ask about a specific day, they refer to the last day of the first marking period. So first I wanted to talk about overall enrollment in the state and what that looked like. So this shows you a 10-year trend, but enrollment as of the fall of 2020 on September 30th was 882,538 students. That is a decrease of almost 27,000 students from the same date on the previous school year. As you can see also, this is very much not in trend with what has been going on over the past decade. In terms of percentages, the increase over the past decade has been anywhere between 0.5% and 1.5% over the past 10 years, with the decline of 3% over just in the last year between fall of 2019 and fall of 2020. Here you see a breakdown by race ethnicity. So the largest decline in terms of percent and in number of students is in white students in the state. That percentage went down 6.1%. Now you can see again that over the past 10 years, the demographics of the state have been changing and the enrollment have been changing. But over the past 10 years, the decline in enrollment for white students has been somewhere like 1.5 each year. So a 6-point decline is significantly greater than that 1.5 decline that we've seen in previous years. I didn't put all those numbers on here because it would have been a whole lot, but you can do the math as well. For our Black students, that decrease was 1.6% over the past school year. And again, that is not on trend. Enrollment of Black students over the past decade has been just about steady. Very, very minuscule changes, if any. And so that decline of 1.6% is not on trend. The Hispanic change between last fall is also not on trend. The increase in the percent of Hispanic students over the past decade has been somewhere between 6 and 8 percentage points, depending on the year. And so you see basically flat from last year to this year, again, very much not on trend. I'm sure that you've heard this anecdotally, but here are numbers by grade band. We see the greatest declines in our earliest grade levels. So on the left-hand side is just pre-K and kindergarten. Pre-K students went down by 26.7% from last year to this year. Again, obviously very, very much not on trend. Kindergarten students went down 10.3 percentage points. Again, very much not on trend from previous years. On the right-hand panel, you see the other grade levels. The remainder of elementary school went down 3.7%, with middle and high school remaining basically steady from last fall to this fall. So, fairly on trend for those two. So we are seeing the most significant enrollment declines in those earlier grades. The next area that we wanted to bring to your attention in terms of statewide trends were attendance. So students are enrolled, but are they attending? We asked systems to report their percent attendance for all students and broken down by student group. What you're seeing here are the number of systems reporting in that range. Again, if you're interested in a particular system, that data are in the master dashboard spreadsheet, which you all have available to you. What this is telling you is that 10 school systems reported their attendance between 95 and 100%. 11 school systems reported that their attendance for the fall was between 90 and 94%. And then 3 school systems reported less than 90% as their overall attendance. Given that school systems have different definitions of attendance in this school year as compared to previous school years because of virtual instruction, it did not provide a trend line for this. But in previous years, average attendance, total percent attendance across the state is something like 94, 95%. And so this statewide trend for this fall is right about in line with what we've seen previous years, very broadly, but it's also not a great comparison to make because of those different definitions of attendance. We did break this down by student group so that you can see percent attendance by race ethnicity. The one data point that I did get the correction on literally 10 minutes ago was this white student data point. This was a data that was entered erroneously by the school system, and that should actually be 96%. And so it should belong in this right-hand column. But what this is telling you for the fall of 2020 is that attendance across student groups looked a lot different depending on the race of the student. So again, going down, I'm going to start with the lower left panel for white students. What this is telling you is that 16, really 17 because of that, the error that we'll fix. But most school systems, all of them actually, reported the attendance for their white students was 90 to 100%. In comparison, looking at Black students, only 16 systems reported in that 90 to 94 or 95 to 100 category. In 8 school systems, the percent attendance for Black African American students was below 90%. And that's how to interpret this. For Hispanic students, 18 systems, those right-hand 2 columns, reported attendance of greater than 90%, and 5 at less than 90%, these 2 left-hand columns. Now, again, this is unfortunately trends that are not too different from previous years. We know that our students their percent attendance is not the same across student race ethnicities. This is what we saw in the fall of 2020. Also reported by service group. And again, we see differences across service group. So this upper left-hand panel is our students with disabilities. 16, the right two bars, 16 systems reported 90% or higher attendance, but 8 systems reported less than 90% attendance. For English learners, 16 systems more than 90%, and 8 systems less than 90%. This also very low number down here is another one that we're attempting to resolve with the school system. So that number might be updated as well. And so we asked, so as you can see, the percent attendance really varied in the fall term by race, ethnicity, and by service group. And again, the exact numbers of each school system are available to the members of the board and to the public via that large dashboard spreadsheet. We also asked, in terms of attendance as part of the first term performance metrics, the percent of enrolled students that had no contact. And so we asked this question actually in the spring when we first went to remote learning, and these numbers were substantially higher. We were seeing numbers at that point in the 3, 4, 5, 8% range. At this point for the fall of 2020, almost every system reported 1% or less of their students that they have been unable to contact. My office thinks that I'm not here. Sorry, my lights just went out because I was not moving. Finally, excuse me, related to attendance, so we put them together, we asked about student participation in extracurricular activities. 9 systems reported that in fall of 2020, their high schools were offering in-person interscholastic competition or practices and conditioning. And then 1 additional system was offering return to play activities at the high school level, even though that wasn't traditional practices or competition. Finally, for fall of 2020, 16 systems reported at least some schools were offering in-person fine arts related service-oriented or other extracurricular activities. That could be all schools to selected schools depending on the way that the school system had it set up. And again, that information is in the large spreadsheet. So the next topic that I'll move on to is learning modes. So we have the students enrolled, we have the students attending school. What kind of learning are they receiving? A reported 55,484 students participated in in-person instruction in one form or another at some point during the first term of the school year. This looked a lot different depending on each school system. And so this 55,000 number includes students who may have been, say, regularly attending in a hybrid mode versus received some limited in-person services. It could take a variety of forms, but that 55,000 number, 6.2% of the fall 2020 enrollment, is the number of students who participated in in-person instruction in some form at some point during the first term. As of the last day of the first marking period, 13 systems were entirely or nearly entirely virtual. And nearly entirely virtual, I mean that 80% or more of their students were receiving full-time virtual instruction. On the right-hand side, you see the number of in-person learning days offered to at least some students. Again, this does not mean that the system was open every day for all students. It meant that they were open for in-person instruction in some form. So you see that 4 systems did not offer any in-person learning days to any students over the course of the first term. And then the remainder of the systems did, offering anywhere from a day or two across, somewhere between 1 and 29 days across the first term, to more than 40 days of in-person instruction to some students over the course of the first term. We also asked how students were selected for in-person instruction. Many systems prioritize in-person instruction for certain student groups or certain instructional groups, students with disabilities, English learners, CTE students, younger students, students with low or no internet connectivity, or systems actually used in-person instruction as a student engagement strategy to reach out to students who were with low or previous non-engagement with virtual learning. Systems also reported using a variety of strategies to determine which students to enroll in person after they made their priority list. Sometimes that was on the basis of parent choice, and in 4 systems, schools could determine enrollment on a case-by-case basis, again, after that priority list, incorporating factors like social emotional need, lack of spring engagement, and fall diagnostic testing in their academic subjects. We also asked questions, not just about the way that students were receiving instruction, but the way that teachers were giving it. So these are 4 different questions that we asked them. We asked the percent, I'll start with the left, the percent of teachers providing in-person, face-to-face instruction as of the last day of the first reporting period. That blue bar at the bottom, 9 systems said that more than 90% of their teachers were doing that. One system, the green, said that between 10 and 50% of their teachers were doing that. And 13 systems said that less than 10% of their teachers were providing in-person, face-to-face instruction. That's the percent of teachers providing virtual instruction from their school building location. So the teacher was there, but the student was not. The blue bar at the bottom, 3 systems said not more than 80% of their teachers were doing that. One system in the red said that between 50 and 80% of their teachers were doing that. And in the purple, 12 systems said that less than 10% of their teachers were providing fully virtual instruction from the school building. The next bar asks about teachers providing fully virtual instruction from their home location. And then the final bar asks about teachers who were in the school building teaching students face-to-face and virtually at the same time. You'll notice that it doesn't quite add up to 24 in each of these 4 bars. Some systems were unable to report this data point, mostly because they said, well, we allow teachers to work from home, or we allow teachers to work from school if they have connectivity issues, but we don't track where they are actually, what their actual physical location is in some of these instances. And so that's why these numbers don't quite add up to 24. The systems reported to us if they were able to. Finally, when we asked about student learning, we asked about the amount of synchronous instructional time that students were receiving. In your dashboard, you'll see this broken down by individual grade level. Here you see it in the aggregate. But 2 systems were providing an average daily synchronous instructional time of less than 3.5 hours. 10 systems were providing average daily time between 3.5 and 4 hours. 8 systems between 4 and 5 hours. And then 4 systems were providing more than 5 hours, with an average across the state of 4.2 hours. And that was a little bit lower in the elementary grades than it was in middle and high. Almost done. We talk about learning modes. Well, what about student access to technology for virtual learning? So these two data points are the estimated percent of students with access to a device and the estimated percent of students with connectivity to support learning. 12 school systems reported that they are basically nearly 100% in terms of percent of students with access to a device. And 9 school systems reported that they are between 90 and 100% of connectivity. But there were also a significant number of systems that reported only between 65 and 80% of their students had a device. That was 7 systems, and there were 5 systems that said that 80% or less of their students had connectivity for learning. Again, all of these exact numbers are in the big master dashboard spreadsheet. Finally, we asked about the way that buildings were being cleaned and the way that that cleaning equipment was available. And all local school systems indicated that they had their necessary cleaning supplies. The classrooms being used for in-person instruction are being cleaned daily. Masks are available, gloves are available, and hand sanitizer is available. Again, those exact questions are the source of that information is the dashboard. So with that concludes the statewide overview of these dashboard and other data. Thank you.
Dr. Shaw, thank you very much. Let's open this up now for board members with questions. And what I would suggest is we look at the dashboard and then take maybe a short break and go into the acceleration measures. So let's open up questions. Dr. Green, Dr. McCarthy, Ms. Morrow, Ms. McCusker. Let's start there, please. Thank you.
First of all, Dr. Shaw, thank you again for your exquisite manipulation of data. Thank you. Couple of questions. First of all, now you said this was for the end of the first term. Do you know when we might get for the end of the second term?
I'm going to have to defer that question.
Thank you, Dr. Green. What we're planning to do is to look to the next term, and we may modify some of the data collection procedures that we're going to use, but we intend to keep up the big questions that the board asked, define the responses for the next term, and then hopefully we'll have some interesting data to look at probably by March.
Okay, my other question concerns disaggregating by gender, especially with the enrollment. Were you not able to do that? About the attendance?
So with attendance, that data are presented to you in the larger dashboard spreadsheet. It was not presented as a slide because there was no significant difference in the attendance across genders. And so the disaggregations were presented to show that there were differences across the student groups, and for that one there were no significant differences, but that data are certainly available and collected and right there on your master spreadsheet.
On this one right here. Okay, I was looking at that, I couldn't find it. Can you point me in the right direction?
I'm going to try and do that without messing up my whole screen.
Mel, it's on the second page. It's like male and female are way down at the bottom for all students, elementary, middle, high school. It's like the last 2 pieces of each.
Yes, I saw that, but is that attendance data?
That is attendance.
Oh, okay. I saw that. I didn't know if that was attendance. Okay, thank you. Well, I thought that was just overall enrollment and not necessarily attendance.
Yes, that is attendance. And no, that is attendance as well. And thank you for pointing that out. I'm looking at it in Excel, so it's hard to tell what page it's on.
Okay, yeah, I saw that. I just didn't know if it were enrollment versus attendance. Thank you.
Is it Dr. McCarthy? I believe is next.
So, of course, I'm very interested in the enrollment decrease in public school. My question is, do you know if they've gone to non-public or are parents choosing to homeschool? And probably it's a combination. And if so, do you have any idea of whether it's non-public enrollment versus homeschooling?
With the data that we collect, we don't have the ability to make any kind of determination on that. The only thing, because by definition, independent schooling is independent, and so their students are not enrolled with us and not tracked by us. The only thing that we can kind of say anecdotally is that if we check census trends, the youth population of the state of Maryland did not take a 6% drop in the last year. But as far as where they're going, we can't tell that in the way that we collect data just by the independent nature of these schools.
Do you have data on who registers for homeschool? I think parents have to register with their counties or with their state for homeschooling.
Yeah, we can ask Mary, Dr. McCarthy, we can ask Mary if there's been a big increase, and I don't think there has been, maybe a slight. But again, anecdotally, what I hear from the superintendents, what they're telling us is that parents are enrolling in private schools.
Okay.
Mary, can you add anything to the uptake on home instruction?
We have a report from that we've collected from local school systems to get numbers on homeschooling. And so we can provide that to you, Dr. Salmon, for the board.
Was there a big increase, Mary, from your?
There is an increase. There is an increase in homeschooling. Yes, Dr. Salmon, there is. I haven't looked at it for a little bit, but I have seen it, and there is an increase in the numbers of homeschooling. Yes.
All right, we'll get this out to the board after the meeting.
Mm-hmm. On that same point, could I just ask if there's an increase in applications for boost funding as families are looking for other options?
I think that process has been over in terms of it was, for the beginning of the school year. So I don't know that we have seen any additional applications, but we can check with the Boost board. Again, that's a separate board that runs that program.
Okay, I believe we have next is it Ms. McCusker and then Ms. Morrow? Did I have it right? Oh, I'm sorry, reverse. Ms. Morrow, please.
Okay, I'm easy, whichever way. One quick question with specifics on the dashboard. For the list for what percent of enrolled students have attempts at contact been unsuccessful, Baltimore County is listed as 15%, which seems really high. Is that one that's being checked?
Let me check right now.
I wasn't sure if that maybe should be like a 1.5 instead of 15.
Yep.
And then the other
Baltimore County. Let me double check.
Yeah, that one just that stuck out.
Yeah.
And then this is a little bit of a bigger question on the last slide where we talk about cleaning in school buildings. One of the questions that I've heard from people is there anything that's done beyond the self-reporting? Is there like another process or verification, or are systems depending on, what the custodian and the principal say, or is there any other kind of check and balance in the process to verify that, to be able to give communities kind of that added sense of trust that yes, this is really happening? Because it's one of the things that, even before COVID, people would say, there wasn't school in the bath, or wasn't soap in the bathrooms, or things like that. How do we instill in our communities that we're doing that differently now?
So school superintendents have been very attentive to the issue of cleanliness in the buildings. And we also, as you know, through not this board, but through the Interagency Public School Commission, the IAC, do maintenance inspections across the state. And so we have those reports as well. So those are different ways that we can actually go in and make sure that these things are occurring. The other way, obviously, is the visits that we do. You know, we have seen the things, the mitigation strategies that are in place, and teachers are telling me about them online. And also, as Friday, for example, I was in Worcester County Public Schools, and they had many stations within and in the hallways as well as in the classrooms for sanitation purposes. And teachers were you know, very happy to have those extra things there. I've also seen the new machines they're using to clean with. You know, the industry, the cottage industry for cleaning has expanded quite a bit, as we can all imagine. And school systems are buying these machines that are doing sanitation, and they're doing them very frequently during the day. So they all have checklists they're using. You can see those kinds of things as you walk around. You know, there's a notice in the bathroom the last time it was checked. We have the same things going on here at the state building. So I do believe everyone has gotten very creative, and they're using all the different ways they can to make sure that everybody's safe. One way that I have to say that was one of the most inventive and creative ways I've seen was Friday. I was in a band room in a middle school in Worcester County, and they actually had students playing their instruments through masks that had been designed by the band director to allow the instrument to go through a hole in their mouth through the mask. And then he had created another outline of a mask to go on the end of their instruments so that the students could actually play. So there's all kinds of really innovation going on to keep our kids safe.
I appreciate that, and maybe something to discuss in your calls with superintendents is, because, you know, obviously parents and volunteers are not going to be in the buildings the same way that we would have prior to COVID, making sure that there's very transparent communication or videos or that sorts of thing to communities so that people really understand exactly what is happening in the buildings. Thank you. You're muted.
I'm sorry. Good point. And you're going to see a video tomorrow, hopefully, that shows some of those strategies.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Great. Ms. McCusker, please.
Thank you. Ms. Shaw, thank you for what is usually and always a very thorough presentation. A couple quick questions. So when we have the data on enrollment, we had 10-year trend data, but in percent attendance, we don't have any trend data. And I know you said that it seemed to be in line with previous years. Is that data that you can just get to us later so we can look at that trend?
Yes, those data are available. It can be presented separately. As I cautioned, the definition of attendance is quite different from this year to last year, versus the definition of an enrolled student is steady, which is why it was not provided at this point. But those data are available even right now, literally via our report card website.
Thank you. I know it's a little different. I just wanted a chance to take a look at it. And when we talk about the student learning modes, and we have the in-person and the virtual, do we have data, are we collecting data on whether the virtual instruction is happening synchronously or asynchronously? For example, do we know the percentage of students that are watching a recording of instruction, synchronous instruction that happened earlier in the day at a different time, as opposed to students who are logging in synchronously? Does that make sense? Like in my district, I daily lessons, and students are allowed to access it asynchronously later. Do we have any idea how often that's happening?
No, so the data that we have on learning modes synchronous instruction is presented to you right here in its entirety. We know that we know the amount of synchronous instruction that's being provided, and we know the ways that the school systems are offering. We learned this in the spring, but as each school system is using different learning management platforms, each school system is able or unable to record data to that granularity of student engagement that you mentioned. Some school systems do have learning management systems that are able to report it that way, or they're asking their teachers to record it in this degree of specificity. Some don't have that capability, or the teachers are not recording it in that degree of specificity, especially as it relates to each individual school system's definition of attendance. And so, as you already described, that this is the procedure in your classroom and in your systems that may not be the same across the state. And what we have are the data that we presented to you, which are those two concepts separately, but not together in the way that you described.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Dr. Getty, Mr. Wu? Dr. Getty, please.
On the slide that talks about synchronous learning, there are two systems that at the end of Q1 were less than 3.5 hours a day. Have those two school systems corrected that?
Mary, do you actually want to talk about the timeline and the board's requirement for that?
Shaw, I was trying to answer that question. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over everyone, but my mute button is a little slow to respond apparently today. It must be this building that was built in the 1800s. So we had two systems that had small differences, and it's something that we hope that they have increased the amount of time, but it was not a huge amount of difference underneath the 3.5. And so I'll let Mary talk because I know she was going to provide another part of the answer. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Salmon. Just in terms of the questions that were collected from the dashboard, just as a reminder, they were asked to respond to the question for the last day of the marking period. Because if we had asked for the full marking period, it would have been such a range, and we would have gotten from September 1 to September, whatever date, from October to another, it would have been different. So we said, what is it the last day of the marking period? Please respond to these questions. Obviously, over time, that changed. It changed again, and it's changing now. So as Dr. Salmon said, as we identify the questions that we need to respond to, we'll give you in March for the end of the second marking period, and you will be able to see for the questions that we asked for the last day, we can ask them again for the last day. Dara's questions, Dr. Shaw's questions were for the full marking period. So it's hard to take a look at it. And Mr. Crawford mentioned this also, and Dr. Salmon did at the beginning, about the difference of where they might even have been at the middle of December versus that date in November.
Thanks, Mary. And Dr. Williamson?
I just wanted to remind you that when the board set the standard of 3.5 hours average synchronous instruction over the course of a week, each day over the course of a week, we told them they had until the end of the year, meaning December 30th, to make that adjustment. So this only captured, as Mary just said, up through the first marking period, and I would assume that by now, hopefully we're going to see that all of them have an average of 3.5 hours across the marking period, across the week.
Mr. Wu, thank you very much. Mr. Wu.
Thank you. So I had two questions. My first being, you mentioned that there were different definitions for attendance this year with virtual learning. I'm wondering if there was a universal definition for different counties, or if different counties had their own definitions for attendance.
Dr. Shaw.
Thank you. I actually would like to defer that one to Ms. Gable.
All right, Mary.
It was part of their plans.
Yeah, the definition of attendance, and it is, let me just say, first of all school systems, all schools were to take attendance daily. So there was no question about was attendance needed to be taken? And the answer is yes. Ultimately, how they did that exactly is reflected in their plan. It was a question to their plan. It was one of the 13 requirements that they needed to respond to in their plans. And I would say as the semester has moved on, they have just gotten better and better at taking this attendance data. But it is reflected in their plan, but there was no question that they had to take attendance.
Okay, thank you. And my second question being regarding the last slide, regarding a path forward, it says to address the widening achievement gap, there must be a focus on the underlying opportunity gaps. I'm wondering from an operational perspective, how these work on paper would translate to the future actions of MSDE.
That's a good cue set for the next presentation.
All right, we'll pick that one up when we come back from break. I have just a couple of questions. Number one, I think you guys did a very nice job. Very pleased with what you presented. Let me ask a question. We have in certain categories outliers. We had one school system that had not had contact with 15% of the students. Another slide we had where there were 60%, let's say, devices or broadband issues. And my question is, in a situation like that, does MSDE reach out to offer assistance? So, it may be part of the problem, and I'm sure the people that are doing the work, so I don't mean to imply that there are any problems with their performance, but maybe the reason why, what would be helpful to them would be some different strategies for reaching students, or if we see the devices, maybe the devices are on order. I don't know, but just trying to think through what do we do with that? And from the state perspective, how do we help school systems that report outlier type of performance? Sort of a general question to think about.
So, again, just to remind everybody that this is a snapshot of where we were on the 45th day since school started. So we will, since that time, we've been providing lots of professional development. I'm still on a weekly call with superintendents every Friday morning to talk about some of these issues. We have provided, we are just sent out $781 million to the state, to the local school systems for any additional costs that they've had. So you're going to see some very different numbers as we look at this the next time. But for the most part, we are constantly working to provide assistance, funding, and any kind of professional development we can. We're sharing strategies. The superintendents I'm encouraging them to share what, one school system has done to deal with an issue. So I would say that that's part of our role for technical assistance, and it's been ongoing since March. And prior to that, normally, but in a little different way since March. So yes, we're looking at all those outliers to try to find out, how we can make a difference.
Excellent. Just wanted to get that on the record to let people know that it's not just that these things are reported and just set there, but there are ongoing efforts to assist the school system. So that's super. Will you be posting any of this data online so the public will be able to see? Are we looking at the more detailed tables? What's your
Everything will be online, President Crawford. I think it should already be up there. At least I'm hoping it is. I thought it would be up there by Friday. Dr. Shaw is shaking her head yes. So hopefully it's there for the public to access.
Okay. Two other questions. One, in terms of student performance, what we've seen in the literature from other jurisdictions is they've seen an increase in the number of or percentage of students who are receiving failing grades. Is that something that we should collect information on? Is it something that you're tracking? Just your thoughts about that. Is that something we need to look at?
I mean, I think it's, I think it's very important to look at that. And I think that's something we have already thought about for the second group of statistics for the next session, because we wouldn't have had all that ready by then. But I think we are definitely looking at that because I think it's a good indicator. I mean, we know now that grades are more indicative of student achievement than some of our tests are sometimes. So I think it's important to have that information. So yes.
Okay. My last question, and then we'll go to break. I can ask these questions because you guys have done such a great job with the data. Let me ask a question about one of the things that we hear from time to time, we've seen in literature and the like, is what impact is this workload, the stress having on teachers? Are we seeing any changes in turnover rates for teachers or bus drivers, support staff, cafeteria workers? Because that will potentially impact where we will be next year if we're, in addition to the normal expansion that we need, but if we've got issues around turnover. Is that something that we should look at as well?
Again, I haven't heard anything but anecdotal kind of information from the superintendents. I think we all recognize that teachers are definitely very stressed out right now, and bus drivers. I think everybody is. All of us are stressed out because we're in the middle of an emergency situation still. But I have not heard, again, anecdotally, that people are leaving the profession, but that may occur. I understand it is happening in other professions. I would say that we're probably going to anticipate losing more leaders than we are, people that are on the ground, because I hear that more from my state colleagues. Again, we have a call every week across the nation, and we are hearing that a lot of superintendents are leaving or retiring. So that's what I've heard more anecdotally than other folks. But I think, everyone is tired. Everybody wishes that we were in a different place right now, and everybody is working to the very, to the highest degree they can work in all areas. And I, again, just want to take a quick shout out our food service workers. Those folks have been doing things, incredible things on the ground. Our teachers, our instructional folks, our counselors are working with kids that are having incredible mental health needs. And again, our childcare workers who've been working through, with the exception of 2 weeks, with kids in their centers all the time, they're doing a great job too. So people are tired. People are working hard. It's across the board.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. If there are no other questions, what I propose is that we take a short break and come back in at 1:20. That gives us about a 10-minute break. Is that adequate? We come back about 1:20?
Sounds very, very good. Thank you.
All righty. Let's do that. Thank you very much. Very nicely done.
Thank you.
Okay, it's 1:20. Let's start to reconvene. Everyone, welcome back. Okay. All righty. We will get started. Great. Very nice dashboard presentation. Let's now start to look at disrupted instruction. Dr. Samuel, initially we talked about acceleration and learning loss. Why the change in terminology? Just curious.
Well, I just felt like when we talked about, and we do still talk about acceleration, and we do still say learning loss, but I don't know, it just felt to us like maybe it was putting the onus on the children that they weren't learning enough. So we kind of decided to turn it around to talk about disrupted instruction, because it certainly has been that over the last 10 months. So that's the rationale.
Okay.
So, Dr. Williamson, are you ready to begin the next segment of the presentation? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And Mary and she's already done it. Mary Gable is going to control the PowerPoint for me, so I really appreciate that. And Mr. Crawford, you'll be happy to know as you read through this and as I talk through it, there's a lot about acceleration within it.
Okay.
Because we're going to have to accelerate students' learning. So good afternoon, Mr. Crawford, Ms. Howley, Dr. Salmon, and board members. This segment of our discussion this afternoon is going to provide an overview of evidence-based strategies our school systems will need to consider to combat the 10 months of disrupted instruction on student learning. As Dr. Salmon noted during the governor's press conference last week, and as our data reflected, and you've seen that, the pandemic has caused an unprecedented disruption in the education of our children. When schools closed last March, none of us thought we would be closed more than a few weeks. And then that stretched into a few months, and now we are approaching close to a year of disrupted instruction for all of our children. We know that to prevent further disruption to students' learning, the best thing we can do is get them back into their schools for in-person instruction. Dr. Salmon has made it clear that is our priority. Although we have attempted to open schools for more in-person instruction since late in the summer, that has not happened successfully in any of our school systems for a sustained amount of time. And consequently, this leaves greater gaps in students' learning. In addition to impeding student learning, I just wanted to mention that it's not just the academic piece, but it's the whole child. And we really need to make sure that we are looking at a way of increasing time for both the amount and quality of learning that's provided to our students. School systems were understandably, and that's full slide, Mary, school systems were understandably unprepared to respond to COVID-19 when it began spreading during the past spring. Our education system has always been based on in-school experiences, be it school-level broadband, internet and devices, curriculum design, and professional learning done with collaborative face-to-face opportunities. Our schools are often the center of such things as meals, school meals, mental health counseling, and childcare. In many homes, especially for low-income families, children didn't have access to the internet, devices, or dedicated quiet spaces to study, and these opportunities occurred for them at school. When schools closed last March, it only took a few days before we recognized the severity of the situation and understood that we needed to do everything possible to ensure learning continued for students. Schools organized to assemble and distribute instructional materials and to make rapid transformation from school-based to home-based learning. Lesson plans were written, materials were sent home, meals, thousands of electronic devices were purchased and distributed, hotspots were set up, and teachers were trained in how to teach from a distance. We have to appreciate the energy, dedication, and sense of urgency that went into these efforts because they were extraordinary. But even with all of those attempts to continue the learning for our students, it has not been enough in the impact of this crisis on all of our students, has been significant. As districts resumed instruction this school year, they recognized the need to address the impact of disrupted instruction and learning, as well as the significant social and emotional toll that the pandemic had taken on students. Through discussions with local superintendents and a survey that was conducted among the school systems, we found our students of color were less likely to have access to the prerequisites of learning: devices, internet access, and live contact with teachers. Even before the pandemic, we knew from previous data we collected that it was our poorest children who carried the heaviest burden and failed to master the basic secondary level skills needed to thrive in work and in life. That has only been exacerbated by this pandemic. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, during COVID-19 school closures, 1 in 10 of the poorest children in the world's largest economy had little or no access to technology for learning. Since we primarily provide remote learning, what happens to the learning of these children? NWEA, which is the Northwest Evaluation Association, published the iReady reading and math assessments, and they have access to data across the nation. They estimate that students scored 5 to 10 percentile points lower in math in the fall of 2020 than in the fall of 2019. Renaissance found that overall students are 2 to 3 months behind in math. Both sources found that little or no impact occurred in reading, and both studies cautioned against interpreting results because large proportions of students with higher concentrations of poverty didn't test at the start of the year and therefore may not be reflected in the results. They believe, consequently, that these finds really do not capture the degree of impact from disrupted instruction. That's in the NWEA. The latest McKinsey report estimates that students began the 2021 school year 3 months behind in math and 1.5 years behind in reading. This research notes that if disrupted instruction persists, it could mean 7 to 8 months in math and 11 to 12 months for students of color. They noted that the learning loss was especially acute in schools that predominantly serve students of color. And in these first couple of slides, I'm just trying to set up the problem of what this disrupted education did so that we can go into what we need to do to correct it. So much of what we see written in education journals, newspapers, blogs, speak to learning loss. Is that really what we mean now? That students have lost the learning that they have? Or do we mean that their education and their learning was disrupted and they may not have gained the knowledge and skills at the rate that we would have expected? And then to complicate this, actually determining how much learning students have lost or not gained is difficult to tell. On a national level, we certainly don't know since state assessments were canceled last spring, and this year's tests won't be given for many months yet. As a part of our recovery plans, our local school systems were required to assess the needs of their students at the beginning of the year. All of our school systems did that, but they didn't all use the same assessments, so we don't have any state-level data to compare to previous years. Although each school system should have information about their own students based on the assessments that they've used. And we've talked with them about how they might use that data to be able to provide us the next iteration of our data with how much learning has been gained in the systems. According to a report by the RAND Corporation, a nonprofit research institution, they report that in high poverty schools, 1 in 3 teachers indicate their students are significantly less prepared for grade level work this year compared to last year. RAND also notes that class failure rates have skyrocketed. In the absence of actual state data on student learning, some estimates are starting to emerge from diagnostic tests that are used across many states. Those estimates are leading to projections, which are then influencing the decisions regarding how to help accelerate students' learning. The latest McKinsey report noted that in the absence of actual data on student learning, researchers projecting learning loss are not doing that with actual information about what happened after schools closed due to COVID. They are using historical data and a host of assumptions. I'm sharing this information to make the point that we have no actual data to show what degree of learning has been lost. We have projections from a number of researchers. But what we do have, and what we do know, is that our students' learning has been disrupted, and they may not be learning at the same pace that they did when they were in school with their teachers. And if they are without the tools that they need to participate remotely, we know that that just compounds the problem. So it's clear we have to rise to the challenges of providing ongoing learning and supports to students and their families. Although some students have responded positively to virtual instruction, for many students and parents, this has been a struggle. In order to get students to the level that they should have been if there had been no disruption to their learning, we will need to improve on opportunities to accelerate their learning. And there are no rigorous studies on the impact of hybrid model and how that affects learning. School systems can now start to create acceleration plans using evidence-based strategies that support students with more time, more dedicated attention, and all of it founded on exposing students to grade level learning. I'll be talking more about each of those three components in the next several slides. There needs to be broad academic support for all students for extended learning time. There needs to be targeted academic acceleration for a subset of students through intensive, high-dosage tutoring. This can be targeted to the students who need it most, leveraging the best formative assessments and early warning systems to identify students at risk. These approaches have been road-tested and will require a significant investment of time and funding if we're going to get them to scale. Research has indicated that variations in student progress are more prevalent now because of the disruption in learning and inconsistent access to high-quality curriculum due to the pandemic. It's important that students be exposed to grade-level content and that teachers understand what is needed in order for students to be successful in accessing that content. Formative assessments are planned, ongoing, and a process used to elicit and use evidence of student learning to improve student understanding of the intended learning outcomes. Effective formative assessment practices support teachers in the process of identifying where each individual student is in his or her progression of learning. It helps teachers determine when and how to quickly adapt instruction in order for students to achieve the predetermined learning outcomes. Teachers have to use formative assessment practices to provide instruction that is responsive to individual student needs. Providing the right support at the right time during initial instruction is necessary for ensuring that all students progress. Formative assessment also enables students to become active agents in advancing their own learning. The formative assessment process provides regular opportunities for feedback so students can understand their learning goals, gauge their own progress towards those learning goals, and determine next steps towards meeting those goals. There is sufficient evidence from research and practice that the formative assessment process, when implemented effectively, positively impacts teacher practice, student engagement, and student outcomes. I'm pleased to share with you that we have a great training model here at MSBE that we've provided each year for teachers that want to get more involved with formative assessment. So on this slide, you can see a variety of ways schools can extend time, opening the summer programs, beginning the school year earlier, extending it later, extending learning during and after the school day, on Saturdays, or on school breaks. You've heard of each of these strategies in the past. More time is an evidence-based strategy that can have positive results for students. But what matters most is what we do with the extra time we have students. We must be certain we are reinforcing core learning. It must be culturally relevant, and it needs to be in small group sizes. When helping students catch up on what was lost during disrupted instruction, it is critical to keep them immersed in grade level content. We saw that on the previous slide, time and grade level content. Recent research from the New Teacher Project suggests that well-intentioned approaches that pull students out of grade level instruction to reteach earlier grade content can really reinforce low expectations and create vicious cycles of underachievement. It has been found that the better approach is for teachers to provide exposure to grade level content while scaffolding students with just-in-time support so that they can access grade level content. This is a natural way of prioritizing the building block content from previous grades that's required to progress. Given the amount of learning that may have been slowed due to the disruptive instruction, as well as the limitations of remote learning, students will probably need additional learning hours. That can come through any of those ways we just looked at on this slide. They're already there. They have proven benefits. There's sort of a slide ahead of me, but I'm going to finish what I'm doing. The most effective programs strive to reinforce core learning, be culturally relevant, and limit groups to 8 to 12 students. While some of these strategies can be implemented now, others should be developed for rapid implementation once we have in-person instruction and it's safe. So this slide really provides some examples of how some states or school systems have expanded time and seen very positive results. There are a number of studies available noting positive results of time to improve student learning. Schools that have restructured to provide 1 to 2 hours of daily tutoring as part of an extended school day have been able to meaningfully close gaps in achievement. Florida is an example of a state that added time to the day and found students' reading scores improved considerably. In Chicago, double-dose math classes in 9th grade, where students received additional time for math in early high school, showed significant positive effects on algebra test scores and long-run outcomes. Chicago required all 9th graders with low math test scores to enroll in both a full-year regular algebra course and a simultaneous algebra support class, usually taught by the same teacher. Teachers in the program received new curriculum to use, like Agile Minds and Cognitive Tutor, which are in many of our schools, and additional professional development on how to utilize them. The intervention wasn't simply about just doubling the instructional time. Teachers received professional development in using extra instructional time to provide complex thinking and math through student-centered instructional practices. The extra time enabled teachers to feel like they could take risks with new modes of instruction. Students who received the double dose treatment showed larger gains in algebra scores, equivalent to about an extra quarter of a year of growth. The gains were largest for students whose prior math scores were between the 20th and the 50th percentile. And I decided to leave that out and moving on to this. Another way to help students catch up on their learning is to make sure those who are behind get tutoring in small groups. Intensive, high-dosage tutoring has demonstrated significant gains in the past and is rapidly taking hold in national conversation as a very promising strategy. Researchers at Johns Hopkins have noted that well-structured tutoring programs can produce gains in reading or math that are equivalent to about 5 months of learning beyond students' ordinary progress. It was also noted in the Hopkins work that sometimes high-quality instructional materials, those that are focused on grade-level content and skills, are often watered down by teachers or not utilized at all. Tutoring offers an opportunity in which tutors can reassure teachers and equip students with the scaffolding and the entry skill they need to be able to manage their classwork. In other words, the tutor can help scaffold the grade-level content so the student can access it. I heard that in a prior slide about tutoring and about using grade-level content. And according to a Fordham report, tutoring stands out as one of the single interventions that could be instituted at relatively modest cost and with rapid speed. Research on tutoring shows gains of 1 or 2 years of growth per year. There are other meta-studies on tutoring that show a significant variation in outcomes across subjects, grade levels, group size, time of day, and types of staff. Each of those factors may have implications for both the cost and the overall effectiveness of the tutoring. In other words, depending on the grade level, can't make my phone stop beeping, I'm sorry. In other words, on the grade level, the group size, the time of day, and the type of staff, there may be variation in the outcome of the program, all in how be implemented and is implemented with fidelity. And here's another example. One study showed that when students in 12 Chicago public high schools got an hour of math-focused tutoring during the school day with one instructor, usually a recent college graduate, for every 2 students, it led to substantially higher test scores, math grades, and lower rates of course failure. Yet, tutoring efforts in Atlanta and New York City, where staffing ratios were higher, maybe 4 or 5 students per tutor, they were not nearly as successful. And this just suggests that we're going to have to be considering the number of tutors that might be critical to make some of these initiatives successful. According to the latest McKinsey report, the proven catalyst for accelerated learning is one-on-one tutoring, one-on-one support for students. But they do recognize that requires bringing more talent into the classroom to provide high-dosage tutoring and coaching. They cite programs where pioneered by Match, one was pioneered by Match Education in Boston and scaled by Sovereign Education in Chicago. It provided students who are behind a grade level in mathematics with individual 50-minute class periods every school day. I just noted the program in Chicago a moment ago, but the McKinsey report brought out the fact that not only did tutors work with 2 students at a time in each session, they also reinforced that they covered content that not only met students where they were, but also linked back to what was being taught in the regular math classroom, the grade level content. Again, we have to make sure that we're moving students forward in their learning. McKinsey noted that the results were impressive. Participating students earned 1 to 2 additional school years of math in a single year. They also noted that follow-up studies in Chicago and Houston have validated those approaches. So as you can see, these high-dosage programs are much more effective than low-dosage volunteer tutoring that we provided in the past on a weekly or an ad hoc basis, which may not have shown any significant effect on academic progression. I thought another interesting fact finding was that some broader research on tutoring found that tutoring has the greatest impact on reading abilities in the early years, especially in kindergarten and first grade, but it had much more impact in math performance in later grades. Tutoring conducted during school hours, they found, is more effective than tutoring after school. And the tutoring using teachers or paraprofessionals is more effective than using volunteers or parents. And that would make sense if we thought about probably the training that went into it. But I do know that there's been a lot of research showing how you can train on these one-to-one initiatives and train paraprofessionals to be able to provide that training and still get really excellent results. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about acceleration academies as well. So this summer, or the summer of 2021, does provide a promising opportunity. A recent RAND analysis of 43 summer programs suggests that 75% of them were effective in improving at least one outcome, especially in reading. Promising examples included acceleration academies, which have helped students gain up to 3 months of learning through 25 hours of targeted instruction in a single subject, usually math or English language arts, over a week-long vacation break. Turnaround gains in Lawrence, Massachusetts, for example, in both math and English language arts appear to have been largely driven by the effects of the week-long acceleration academy aimed at struggling students. Acceleration academies, described in a research paper by Shooter, Redmond, and Dunning, indicated the academy provided struggling students with targeted, small group instruction in a single subject delivered by select teachers over week-long vacation breaks. Students who had been selected for a special opportunity to get extra help worked in homogeneous ability groups of around 10 to 12 students and received about 25 hours of extra instruction. The academies cost about $800 per student per week and led to student gains of 0.1 standard deviation on both math and reading, equivalent to about 3 months of student learning. I think it's really important to consider that because when we have breaks and we can provide these kinds of opportunities to students, this may be a good use of some of our tutoring dollars that we've had made available to us. And we haven't maybe had these research-based programs that we know have proven effectiveness. Another thing I wanted to mention is early childhood programs. And I know that you're all familiar with early childhood. You hear us talk about it all the time. Research shows that early childhood programs foster substantial gains in school readiness and are a key lever when it comes to narrowing achievement gaps that emerge before children even start school. The early years of child's life are critical for later health and development. And the brain grows starting before birth and continuing into early childhood. How well a brain develops depends on many factors, including the child's experiences with other children, other people, and the world, such as parents and their early childhood teachers. Children depend on parents as their first teacher to develop the right skills to become independent and lead healthy and successful lives. Working parents depend on high quality, early childhood learning and development when they can't be there to nurture their children's growth every day. This year, we've expanded investments to support Maryland's early childhood system, and we've increased the value of child care scholarships for low-income families so that they can better access quality early childhood education. Maryland's data show that children entering kindergarten, demonstrating readiness to engage in the kindergarten curriculum, are proficient in third grade tests. We shared that study with you last year, I believe. We ran that study and did show that was to be the case. Our state has been a leader in expanding early childhood opportunities and investing where it will make the greatest impact. The increase in value of child care scholarships means more children will enter school and be able to work towards achieving success. And with Governor Hogan's commitment to early learning, we've expanded our Judy Center early learning hubs, our family support centers, and early childhood workforce support. This summer, we're going to be providing extended learning opportunities for thousands of rising kindergartners across our state with the purpose of mitigating possible learning loss that may have occurred due to the pandemic. And you heard in our data that we had a number of early childhood pre-K students who didn't attend. We're going to make available a bridge program for the summer for some of those students that will be able to come in and get some additional instruction so they'll be ready for kindergarten when they come in. Nobel laureate James Heckman finds a 13% return on investment for comprehensive, high-quality, birth to 5 early education due to a wide variety of life outcomes such as health, crime, income, IQ, schooling, and the increase in mother's income after returning to work due to childcare. Early childhood is an area on which we need to continue to focus our attention and to ensure that our children develop these skills that they need to be successful in the coming years. So we can't forget them as we're looking at initiatives to think about our young children. Okay, so now I'm going to just remind you, this slide really lists those evidence-based practices and strategies that were discussed in the prior slides, ones that we need to strongly consider implementing in our school systems now and throughout the next years. I mention years because the research shows that it may take several years for our students to be able to gain back some of the skills and knowledge that they didn't gain when they had disrupted instruction. So some of these strategies will be more costly than others, but without them, the cost of our children's education is priceless. We can't even put a price on it. So you'll notice here we have utilized high-intensity structured tutoring. We talked about that. Provide extended day or extended year programs. Offer summer school programs. Implement acceleration academies. Utilize formative assessment. And sustain early childhood programs. I have only 2 more slides, and that I'd like to share with you, and then I'll come back to this slide so you can discuss and give input on the strategies that you think we really need to support. And each of them costs money, and we know that school systems will want to particularly look at ones that meet their needs, but we might want to have some input on which ones we think they really should consider. We're also interested in our public's opinion regarding which of these strategies they believe are most important for helping students accelerate their learning due to disrupted instruction of past 10 months. So we have developed a brief survey that will open on the front page of our website at the close of today's meeting. And we invite the public to let us know on which of these strategies they would like to see us focus. That survey will be posted for 2 weeks, and then we'll come back and compile that information and report back to the state board on what that data showed. But it will actually report each of these items and have people weigh in on if they think that's the most important strategy, a strategy they don't think is as important as others. They can indicate if they're at elementary, middle, and high school level. So I'm going to go on to the next slide just for a minute, and then I'll come back to that slide. So we find ourselves in a very difficult time where we and our school systems are preparing for potential budget cuts. And at the same time, we also have to handle the increasing cost for technology, meals, supports for trauma, and new teachers needed for smaller class sizes due to social distancing. COVID-19 has had and greatly exacerbated sort of a triple squeeze on rising costs, declining revenue, and greater student need, challenges that districts were contending with even before the pandemic struck. But during this pandemic, the very same students who historically have been underserved continue to be the ones with the least access to safe, high-quality, engaging instruction. These increased needs and exacerbated inequities will be ongoing and will continue to compound over time if we don't take swift and urgent action. And it is the student, the communities, and school districts that face the biggest challenges and inequities to begin with, who have lost the most from this pandemic and will have the greatest needs to overcome. While the full picture of student need is continually evolving and difficult to capture in its entirety, the magnitude of need and historic inequities that go along with it will require structural changes and new investment over the long term. In districts with high concentrations of students who have been the most impacted by the pandemic, effective recovery and support strategies must address the root causes of educational inequities by reaching large numbers of students and providing more targeted support for the students who need it most. While these investments could restore students to pre-pandemic learning levels, the disparities that existed even before the pandemic began vastly exceed the recently emerging needs, and we need to pay attention to both and provide action on both as well. Federal stimulus funding through the CARES Act and the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Act provided opportunities to support vulnerable students during the COVID-19 crisis. Additionally, the governor included over $150 million in his allowance to also support these efforts. All of these funds were allocated in the same manner as Title I funding, such that our most vulnerable students receive the support and resources they require. As we're granting out these funds to school systems, they will need to identify how they are using them and ensure that strategies they are planning to implement are evidence-based. MSDE will be establishing and training a team of monitors, much like those we've assigned to our CSI schools. That's our Comprehensive Support and Improvement Schools. And this team will be trained to assist in the identification and implementation of evidence-based strategies and programs and monitor them to ensure that they're being implemented with fidelity. The team will also closely monitor timely and appropriate use of awarded funds to ensure that they're spent as they were intended. And then just to close on this particular thing, and we'll come back and have full discussion, the COVID-19 pandemic has both illuminated and magnified the persistent disparities between different races and income groups in the United States. In education, attention has largely focused on the achievement gap, which is widening because of this pandemic. But to address the achievement gap, schools have to focus on underlying opportunity gaps. It's imperative that we provide every child with an opportunity to succeed. While the COVID-19 pandemic has forced this generation of students to face challenges that could shape the rest of their lives, it could also inspire us to bring excellence and equity to our education system. It is now time for us to determine how we can best do that and accelerate the learning for all of our children. So we're closing with your words of acceleration, President Crawford. And we can go back to that slide if you like. It shows all of the strategies, or you all have that in your packet. Or you may have other questions you would like to ask or comments you'd like to make about some of the information that was in the presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Williamson. I think what you put together is very, very good. Some of us participated in a Zoom meeting with the National School Board Association the other day. They covered a lot of the very same things: purposeful execution and implementation, the use of proven approaches make a difference. So I'm really happy to see how you have built that in. Let me ask a couple of kickoff questions and then open up to the rest of the board. Think back to where we were last summer. You engaged the school systems and we came up with guardrails. And we thought that they were going to largely implement hybrid. And when school started, they implemented virtual, and then a number of people within the school system and the legislature came back and said, well, MSDE, you didn't provide any guidance. You weren't clear enough. So with that being the case, what do you, I just throw this out, we don't need to decide it now. How would we handle this differently? So for example, under tutoring, I understand that when you look at structured tutoring, there's certain studies that lay out requirements. These are the 5 things, 6 things, 10 things that have to happen to make structured tutoring work. What if we took a different approach and just brought the stakeholders together and agreed upon what are the evidence-based studies that we would use and have them define the 5, 10 things that have to be present. And then have that, and as the school systems decide what they're going to do, their focus then is, how do I implement, if I'm going to implement tutoring for this particular population, then how do I deliver the 5 or 10 steps that are required? So basically, having them agree, help define what those elements are, and that's what they have to do. And then that helps guide some of the spending. Being a former finance person, maybe the people in Maryland are a whole lot better than some of the places I've been before. But sometimes just giving people money by itself doesn't necessarily improve anything. I mean, the only thing we get out of it is that they've spent more money. But when you look back at the end of the day, it's hard to define and see what they did. Now, maybe Maryland's a whole lot different than other places I've been. But I just want to just throw this out of taking one where we just sort of they said we didn't lean forward enough. Okay, let's lean forward then. Just throw this out for discussion.
Before Dr. Williamson answers that question, President Crawford, I just want to reiterate that we did provide guidance, and a lot of guidance. So I just don't want that to leave the note on the floor.
Please, thank you for correcting me. I didn't mean to imply that. I'm just saying how people then turned around.
I got it.
They didn't get it.
I knew what you were saying, but I want to make sure because
absolutely.
Just check out the website. It's got a plethora of resources and has had since June. So Dr. Williamson, I know you can talk about this in terms of a model, what we've done for other school systems within our division that Tara Booker-Dwyer heads up.
Dr. Williams, I think you were muted.
Thank you. I didn't realize I muted. Thank you. I was saying that our CSI schools, our comprehensive support and improvement schools, had a model that was established through our leadership development group, and that was Tara Booker-Dwyer's group, that really looked at how we could provide a system of coaches and training to the schools that were identified as CSI schools, provide leadership skills and to help them monitor what was happening in the school and provide the kinds of strategies they needed to be implementing in their schools. We've talked about doing something similar here, but I would like to go back and just address what you said about the guardrails we set up. I think we did set up guidance. I'm not sure that after we set up the guidance and we provided it, we were in such a hurry to make sure we got so many other pieces established that were not established. Perhaps one of the things that we've had the staff to do it, we should have been out providing more support and monitoring what was going on. So we sort of turned everybody loose with, here are all the things you can consider, we've given you guidance, but maybe we should have done more with monitoring what was going on when they started their programs, or being able to address some of their needs. That's just my personal opinion. And I do think that guidance is important, but sometimes that means you have to have opportunities to visit school systems and be in the school systems. And at that time, remember, we were being much more restrictive in where we were. And we were learning to operate through a system of Zoom meetings. And I think we were realizing what our biggest need was at that time was, since we had all this virtual learning going on, we were making every effort to get the training to teachers for remote learning. And I think if you heard anybody talking to us about what happened between last spring and when students returned in the fall, school systems and MSDE as well provided many, many opportunities for teachers to gain those skills. And I heard from many parents, and I've heard teachers say this, I've heard administrators say, there was such a world of difference in the kind of instruction that was being delivered when they came back. But that kind of instruction is totally different from what we're asking people to do next, which is the hybrid model. And so we do have some people that have begun the hybrid model. And I know that Mrs. McCusker can answer this too. It is very difficult to have a group of students in front of you and also be needing to teach the group of students that are remote so that they're getting instruction together, or how you're doing some things synchronously across them. It requires different kinds of equipment. And we've been studying that, and that has sort of been our next focus. So what I was going to say is, we really need to establish what the needs are. What are our greatest needs? If we know we're going to be hybrid from now until the end of the year, one of the things we know we have to do is get guidance out to our teachers on how they can teach in a hybrid manner. And we already have a group of people working on that and hope to have something out in another month. It would be supports for teachers and schools. That's one piece. Then we know that we have students that need support. And we have some students that are in school. But what we said, and it turned out our dollars, I never get to talk like this. Thank you very much, Dr. Simon. So one thing that I know happened with the tutoring dollars that went out, they went out very quickly. And we said, you have to implement an evidence-based program. And people wanted to do that. And to no one's fault, it was a very short period of time that they had, just a few months. They had to identify the program. Then they had to try and implement it. They were still learning to teach remotely. So many things going on. And I think that now we have a much better handle on which of these tutoring programs, what is it about the tutoring programs that are most effective? It can't just be have some, I made a little comment about that in the research that I shared. Just having parents or someone come in and help kids is not the kind of tutoring program that is the intensive structured tutoring program that needs to take place for those students who have the most needs. So we have to really set up what that is for the students that have the most needs. And we need to be working with our school systems and who they believe in their school systems need that. And if that is where they want to focus some of their dollars that they have on that particular model. Other school systems might say, our biggest need is providing something to our young children, because we know so many of them weren't in school, didn't have access to remote, or didn't understand remote instruction very well. And we think that offering something extended year for our young children would be the most important thing we do with our dollars. And there are models out there for doing that. And it would be not taking them back to capture what they learned this last year, but starting with what they're supposed to have and then providing some structure for how they learn it and scaffolding for them so that they can use their current information and continue to learn. So, I mean, I think there's so many different things we can do. And I believe
you can tell Dr. Williamson has already been thinking about what we're going to be doing going ahead.
Don't stop,
and
because
I can tell you that her staff is taking copious notes right now because that's going to be their next to-do list. So I think the answer to your question is yes, we do have some plans moving forward, and we're going to be discussing those with our superintendents across the state in the upcoming meetings that we have with them.
Excellent.
Thank you, Dr. Simon.
The other thing I would just say, and I'll turn it over to questions for the board, is with the notice about the testing, consider perhaps a press release and other things like it, maybe hitting social media so that people are aware that that survey's out there to provide input.
Okay.
Questions?
Will do.
Okay. Questions from the board? I can't see you, so you'll need to speak.
Senator Bates.
Senator Bates, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a pretty lengthy, very detailed presentation. One of the things I was hearing from some of the teachers was they were having to completely redevelop their lesson plans to meet the online type learning and so forth. I know that because of some of the conferences I've been to, that there are lots of online kind of programs available. Are we in any way trying to evaluate those or see if any of those can be used so that we aren't recreating the wheel? You know, I know this is a real challenge for teachers to be trying to teach online, frankly, for people like me who are not technologically, proficient. Even these meetings can be a challenge. So, I kind of understand a lot of that difficulty, but I also know there's things like the Khan Academy resources that have lessons available among other things. And are we making use of that, or are we trying to recreate everything?
So Senator Bates, I'm going to interrupt for just a minute to ask Carol to take down her presentation so we can see everybody again. That's helpful to me as well. And I just want to say that, yes, it is a different way to teach, but I have to, again, call out our teachers who have been doing some of this since, the early fall. I got to watch it again in person Friday, and I was amazed at how well they are doing the combination teaching. It looks like many of our school systems, at least the ones I've been in, and I know President Crawford was with me in Cecil County, but they have figured this out. I mean, definitely we need to provide more assistance to some school systems, and teachers will certainly continue to do that and share the information that Dr. Williamson is doing with her digital learning committee that she and Ms. Halley are also working together with. But I have to tell you, what I saw Friday was astounding with the teachers. I was in 2 elementary schools and also a middle school, and I was really impressed with the quality of the instruction for both the students in the classroom and the students online. And the students online were better proficient than many of us are with using their online platforms. And so I'm very encouraged that our teachers continue to be so innovative and creative in how they're doing this. But yes, we are working on, providing a number of digital resources going forward. And I know that the school systems, I watched as many online professional developments. I was able to sit in on some of those this past summer. And school systems have really stepped up their professional development in this area. Great question, though.
I don't know if you can see.
I'm Dr. Wilcox, Dr. McCarthy, then Ms. Halley.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Williamson, for your presentation. And I loved that you did mention social and emotional learning. And one thing I kept thinking watching the presentation, in our plans to accelerate learning, we have to really think carefully about student mental health. Because a subset of our students have experienced bereavement from COVID deaths, family financial issues, and other family social major setbacks, and loss of opportunities in the case of student athletes and other groups. So our approaches that are intended to be well-intended, I'm just hoping that they don't add to burden in a specific subset of students that have been really greatly affected from a mental health perspective by the pandemic. So that was just one thought that I wanted to mention. And back to the dashboard, I think it was great that you guys prepared all the material. It would be helpful to have a column on change in attendance from pre to post COVID, because I think that would just be a helpful metric for us to see the extent of even more burden in terms of attendance problems. So I'll stop there and thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wilcox. I just want to go back to your first point. And I remember on one of the superintendent's calls, I don't know, it might have been a few weeks ago, but one of the superintendents, and we all agreed, said, you know, the first thing we're going to do when we get our kids back is to make sure they're okay. And I think that that is really where we have to start, and that nurturing part, and that, you know, that is important. And the students that I've been able to talk to on my school visits, they're excited to be back in school, but you know, we have that honeymoon period where, you know, it's just like, you know, the first day of school or, you know, a holiday. We are excited for that day, but we have to keep our eye on the students to see how they really are doing when they come back to school. So it is on everyone's minds, but I appreciate you bringing it to the forefront.
Thank you. Dr. McCarthy.
Hi, thanks. Great presentations, and I really appreciate both presentations very, very much. And lots of food for thought. I particularly love the research, Dr. Williamson, that you brought forth with tutoring and group size. And I would, you know, offline, I would love some of those citations because they were excellent. Because I've looked at it, and also years ago I saw some research that even said groups of up to 4 can be very beneficial. So if money is an issue, if you place children with similar skills in a group of 4, you can also target the instruction, and it can be very beneficial. So I also want to say, Dr. Wilcox, you know, the name of the day or the word of the day is empathy and grace. So we all have to give each other empathy and grace, give the children, give the families, give the teachers, and it has been, we won't even know the effects of the trauma, and sometimes we just carry it on our shoulders and we don't even know what the stress is. So I appreciate that. I do want to say 2 things, though, when we talk about tutoring, and you talked about giving children grade level access, not bringing them back to what they might have lost. I think that may work for more neurotypical learners, because it's what I call spread effect. If you start at a higher level, the back information will backfill. But for struggling learners, and not even learners who are identified as having special education needs, the struggling learners need a more didactic, explicit type of instruction. And so to take a kindergartner, first grader, second grader who's not up to snuff in reading, to give them grade level instruction in reading, it's kind of like putting me on a tennis court. You know, it's not my thing, not what I can do, and don't put me in with one of the experts, because it just won't work. So I think that for the skill-based instruction, like reading and like math, it's important for the decoding, for the spelling. It's important to place them where they are and instruct from there, as well as with the math. The grade level access comes more to the thinking. So give them grade level access to the literature and the thinking that goes along with the literature, and the grade level access to the math problem solving and the math thinking. But those skills that support that thinking, if they don't have those skills, bringing them at grade level instruction is not going to be as successful as you want it to be. So that's just from my own experience. The other thing that I worry about, and I know you know this, and that's why you suggested paraeducators and college students, workforce is an issue. Teachers are tired. So in back in the day, it might have been, yeah, teachers would like to have some extra income, a little extra tutoring, but you know, even summer work, teachers are tired. So building a workforce is going to be an issue, and for us to step outside the box, and I like paraeducated college students, and definitely training and paying as opposed to volunteers. So I agree with that, and I just do love the fact that you have specific targeted recommendations that can be implemented. I think that's very helpful for the state. So thank you very much for that.
Dr. Melanie McCarthy, thank you for your added expertise, and we certainly agree with all of the things that you said, and we will make sure we are more explicit when we talk about tutoring versus some of the skill development, which we know has to occur. And I know Dr. Williamson, being a former elementary school teacher, knows exactly what you were saying, but thank you for that, and we will make those references available. Dr. Williamson at some point can make her notes available to the board, and that way you'll have that information for your use.
Excellent, excellent. Ms. Halley?
This is really building on the previous comments. Thank you very much for that great presentation, Dr. Williamson. And you mentioned a few times the importance of grade level content and of curriculum that is high level quality. So my question is, in terms of, is that something that there is a policy recommendation? Is that something that you're putting to work as you're working with local school systems as they do their plans in terms of recommendations? How do we codify that around the state our students are getting access to the high level curriculum and grade level content?
Dr. Williamson?
I was unmuting. I think that probably that's going to come through some work with some of the staff at the local levels, talking to them about the importance of this, because I don't know that we've had this conversation. And I have recently heard some systems say how they are looking at pushing back a year and picking up the content that people lost. And so there is a concern that the students then will never catch up because they're always going to be behind. So we have to find a way to provide them with, starting where they are. We don't know that they don't know the skills that they have to have. Not onto the skills, Ms. McCarthy, Dr. McCarthy, but I think that that's going to be really on us to make sure we're working closely with those local school systems and how they're planning.
I think also, Ms. Haley, the other thing that I wanted to interject is that, we've been spending a lot of our energies and time on literally trying to get kids back in the classroom. And, what strategies and the research we're doing to show that it's safe, and the protocols and getting out funding. And I think now, as we transition into the spring to getting more students back, we can really change our focus back to where it was normally in providing technical assistance for education out of the State Department of Education. So I'm hopeful that our emphasis will become more in that area, which, will be more focused on the things that you just talked about. So that's my hope for the spring.
Yeah, I also think in line of, we're going to be generating new documents as people are looking to planning for next school year. And I think the guardrail concept is a good way to move forward in terms of guidance and local execution plans. So effective curriculum and content level work in guardrails. I'd love to see something there that respects that balance, but gets the state moving in the right direction.
Excellent. Thank you for that point.
Mr. DeShields.
Thank you, Dr. Williamson, for that presentation today. I think this is one of the most crucial issues that we will be addressing over the next few weeks or months, and appreciate your putting some of this information on the website so that you can get additional insights from other constituencies about some of these strategies. I guess my question really goes to President Crawford in terms of the importance of these strategies and how we make them a high priority on our to-do list. So maybe we have already done that by virtue of the nature of the presentation today, but it seems to me that addressing these strategies and making decisions around strategies that will address disrupted instruction is critically important. And I'd just like to suggest at the appropriate time that formally we decide that this is a priority that needs to be incorporated in our goals and objectives, and give it the kind of attention that it needs. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shields. And we have Ms. Morrow.
Thank you very much. I had a question. I want to go back to Dr. Williamson was talking about a survey that's going to come out today. Is there other collaboration that is going to take place with this, either with as a stakeholder group or with labor partners, with the legislature? Is the survey just kind of the starting point, I hope?
Well, I can answer that. Dr. Williamson and I, again, will be making presentations to the educational groups, the superintendents. Also, she'll be discussing this and has been discussing this with assistant superintendents. Our content people are certainly in touch with the content level people out there. And yes, it is to get people to be engaged in what's ahead. So, we can definitely have the educational stakeholder group come back and take a look at this as well once we see the survey results. So this is the beginning of the plan for the future.
Okay. And so with that survey, is that going to be something that you guys can also disaggregate by county to see if, if as people respond, yes, that there's...
I think we have that information on there.
We have county, and we also have grade level, not grade level, elementary, middle, high, thinking that people's interest might be for one particular kind, depending on the age of their children.
Okay. And then the other, as we move forward, even talking about into the summer, so we know that with reopening, even when schools get reopened in whatever fashion, not all families are going to be back in person. Every district seems to still be retaining that option to have virtual. And I know in Prince George's County specifically, as long as case rates continue to be high, the faith that people feel, or the comfort that they want to have to be back in person is just not there yet. They don't trust that people won't send other sick kids. They don't trust that the facilities are going to totally be what they should be. How do we translate that into the summer as well? Are we still thinking about some of these things happening in a virtual way for people who are still not fully ready to be in person?
So every parent always has the option, and we said that back in August. We said it in June, actually, when we were planning, that parents could still choose to educate their children in a virtual environment if they wanted to. And actually, we figured out the percentage across the state was around 30%, we figured, would still want to have the virtual learning opportunity. And that still continues going forward. And that was stated several times. In terms of going forward, though, I think that's still an option. If parents want virtual instruction, then I think school systems will provide it. We have a pilot going on right now in the Eastern Shore to do a virtual school with 9 different counties. So I think we're going to see some differences moving ahead in how education is delivered. But I would have to say for the vast majority, at least 70% of our kids, being in school in person is critical. And so I think that, we really do want to see summer programs as much as possible be in person for that peer interaction, for that socialization, for all the things we've seen and heard, and all the letters I've had from pediatricians who are telling me that it's crucial for the majority of kids to be in-person learning. So all the options are still on the table, and we may be changing the way we deliver education in the future. And I think it's going to be a huge challenge for the next superintendent to figure out how they're going to be doing that and how they're going to be open-minded and creative and innovative about how we move forward.
May I also, you asked about summer school, and I surveyed all of the counties very recently, and they are all planning something for the summer for various groups of students. And they will have a virtual piece, and they will also have their in-school piece that they're hoping they'll be able to offer. So they're all looking forward to the summer, and they might be able to have more in-class, in person.
Thank you for that. I mean, I truly want all of our students to be back in person too. Again, like I said, I think that trust piece is big. People being able to trust that they're going to be safe with staff, with students in the community. And I think until we get community rates lower, it's hard to trust everybody when there's clearly still community spread. And I think that's something that in Prince George's County, I see a lot of that concern that just continues. So thank you.
Ms. Morrow, then Dr. Green. Ms. McCusker, Dr. Green.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Lots of information, lots to think about, and you're clearly passionate about it. It was wonderful to see your passion come out in that presentation. I wanted to thank you as a teacher for expressing how effective formative assessment is. Teachers use formative assessment all the time to inform their daily and weekly instruction of students. And I think that that component is going to be really crucial in identifying which students need these extra scaffolding and tutoring and whatever programs counties decide and the state decide to implement. I think that formative assessment piece is going to be the underpinning of that. So thank you for emphasizing that. The other thing I wanted to ask is about the survey that you talked about releasing this afternoon. Is that something that can be sent to locals for them to disseminate to families? And I say that because I think it's a rare parent that hops on the MSDE website to do a survey. But I think lots of parents do pay attention to the emails that they get from their local school systems. And so that's just a suggestion of mine to get a little bit maybe higher rate of participation from parents.
We can explore that, but we have to look and see how we can compile all of that, because it would be really important to be able to share that information with all of you. But let's see what we can do.
Dr. Williamson is expressing what I was trying to say while I was muting and unmuting. The issue is compiling that information. Yeah. I think we want a quick read as much as we can. I will, say that we'll certainly be queuing in the local school systems about this and having them weigh in, and certainly they're welcome to also get information. But we've got to move forward on this in a fairly quick way. But we'll see what we can do. The devil is always in the details, right?
Absolutely. So maybe some kind of link or something back.
Correct.
Yep. Dr. Green.
Yes, I wanted to ask, Dr. Williamson, I didn't know if you would think it an appropriate strategy that somewhere that we have or incorporate training for parents. I've heard from a number of parents that they were just lost when their kids brought this work home. They didn't know how to even approach it, how to help their kids, how to support their kids. If school systems could do that, or if we could recommend that.
That is something that school systems are doing, Dr. Green, in terms of providing, parent training. That is something that our family engagement section can take a look at. But primarily, that's going to come from the local school systems because they're all using potentially different materials. But that is a great suggestion. Then we'll certainly pass it along. And I know that they've heard that from parents too, because I've seen it in the myriad emails I'm getting. So good to bring it out in the public.
All righty. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Dr. Salmon, do you have anything further for this afternoon?
No, we'll be meeting again tomorrow and going into the items that are on tomorrow's agenda, and looking forward to the discussion that occurs with that. And I think other than, I don't want to start debating research again, but I want to caution board members that we really do need to make sure that we're following the science when we talk about school reopenings. And I'll just leave it at that. So thank you.
Okay. All righty. Seeing no additional business, I'm open to entertaining a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Senator Bates, seconded by Mr. DeShields. Seeing no questions, we'll do a voice vote. All in favor, say aye. Raise your hand. Voice vote. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. See you tomorrow morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.